The wind blew hot against the dusty road, carrying with it the tang of rotting carrion left too long in the sun. They said the smell of war never truly disappeared in Westeros, it only shifted and changed with the seasons. Arya Stark understood this in ways she wished she did not. The battered cloak wrapped around her shoulders carried stains from her travels, blood, mud, sweat, and it blended seamlessly with the tattered garb of her companion. Sandor Clegane, the Hound, walked beside her, his heavy footfalls grinding the gravel beneath his boots. A hush seemed to fall on the world whenever he drew close, as if even the breeze knew to pause in his presence. She remembered the day she almost left him behind. That day in the Vale when Brienne of Tarth had challenged him, leaving him wounded. Arya had stood there, young and furious, her soul bruised and battered by the endless betrayals and violence that had haunted her path. In that other life, she'd walked away and left him to die. But in this new threat of fate, she stayed her feet and returned to kneel beside him. She touched his brow and felt the fever burning hot through his scarred face. A part of her had wanted to watch him die, for she still nursed a deep hatred for all the cruelty he had inflicted upon the small folk, upon her friends, upon her childhood illusions. But some deeper instinct, whether it was the memory of the times he had protected her, or the fact that she was sick to death of being alone, stayed her hand. So she left with him, half carrying him on an old donkey she found in the next village, feeding him soup and watery ale until he was strong enough to stand unaided. Arya had no illusions about what this meant. They were not friends. They were uneasy allies bound by necessity. They were a girl from the far north whose entire family had been torn asunder, and a broken warrior with the face of a monster. But perhaps that was enough. Perhaps in all the chaos and ruin, that sliver of loyalty was all that remained. They followed roads less traveled, forging west and then south, away from the Vale, away from those who might recognize them. Time was strange on the road. Days blurred into nights, nights bled into weeks. She hunted small game while he snored by the dying embers of a campfire. He never apologized for the time he kidnapped her, she never expected him to. But in slow, incremental ways, they learned to trust each other. When the cold set in at night, he slipped off his half-cloak and tossed it at her without a word. When a group of bandits attacked, she fought beside him, water dancing with her blade like she had been taught by Sirio Farrell, leaving 3 men gasping out their last in the dirt. She felt nothing as she watched them die. Perhaps that emptiness inside her was the price she had to pay. His strength returned, marked by the unrelenting scowl carved onto his face. The road stretched on. Eventually, talk of war, new alliances, and the shaky condition of King's Landing reached them. The lion had fallen, the dragon had returned, and chaos reigned. The Hound drank in these rumors with a sort of predatory eagerness. Arya listened, always quiet, always calculating. Her name still had power in some corners of the realm, but it was mostly attached to the story of a poor girl who had perished in the tumult. After all, how could little Arya Stark still be alive when so many had died? But alive she was. And with each passing day, as they moved closer to the heart of the realm, her hatred for the Lannisters still burned like a forge. The Red Wedding was an ever-present brand upon her soul, a wound that refused to heal. If King's Landing was about to implode, perhaps she could do more than just witness the downfall of her enemies. Perhaps she could catalyze it. As for the Hound, the reasons he gave for heading there changed whenever he felt like speaking. Sometimes he said he wanted to collect debts long owed, sometimes he hinted at coin and a new life, and sometimes he merely shrugged. Got nowhere else to bloody go, he'd say in that graveled voice. Yet Arya sensed there was a pull in that city for him, some bitter closure he needed. So they continued on, a pair of outcasts forging a path toward the largest den of vipers in the 7 kingdoms. One evening, as they camped near a shallow stream, the Hound spoke of a rumor that someone in the Red Keep was quietly hiring mercenaries and cutthroats, paying them well. Might be we can get some coin, he said, glancing at the girl. The dancing firelight made his scars look deeper. This realm is always starved for killers, especially with the shape King's Landing is in now. He watched her reaction carefully. Arya mulled it over, staring into the fire. I don't care about coin, she finally said. I have other reasons to go. He spat into the fire. Revenge. Always revenge with you Starks. It's what's kept you going this far, isn't it? She didn't deny it. She simply continued chewing on a thin sliver of dried meat. What else is there? He had no answer. He poked the fire, sending orange sparks spiraling toward the night sky. They rode into the city not long after dawn broke on a dreary, rain-clogged morning. King's Landing smelled worse than she remembered, all sour sweat and rancid sewage. At the battered gates, the Hound had pulled his hood low over his face, and Arya followed suit, letting her matted hair half conceal her features. The guards only gave them a cursory glance, drawn as they were to the commotion of refugees and traders clogging the streets. The city was choked with people, and outside the walls were tents and ragged encampments of men and women hoping for some shred of safety or prosperity within. War had torn the countryside in such a way that King's Landing, despite its own perils, appeared the only place to exist, for good or ill. No one spared an extra look for a tall, broad-shouldered man and a scrawny young woman riding a half-lame horse. The city swallowed them, as it did so many nameless faces. They found a dingy inn tucked among cramped buildings off a crooked alleyway in Flea Bottom. The floors were sticky, the air thick with rot, and a few drunks lay sprawled along the benches. The Hound slammed a coin onto the scarred counter, demanded a room, and said nothing else. The keeper, lips twisted in a near-toothless grin, led them upstairs. The bed was little more than straw stuffed into burlap, but it suited them well enough. "Stay here," Sandor said, once the keeper had shuffled away. "I'll poke around, see which side's hiring." Arya offered a small shrug, but her eyes were glinting with something beyond weariness. If he noticed, he did not remark on it. He strode out, leaving her alone. She knew better than to just wait. She set to work tidying her meager possessions. A small, slender blade needle, a few coins, scraps of cloth for bandages. The bitterness she felt was like a dull ache that never subsided. So much she had lost. So many names she still whispered at night. As she waited, she wondered whether any of them still lived. Sansa in the Eyrie, Bran and Rickon rumored to be dead, Jon at the Wall, fatherless and alone. She swallowed. Family was a wound that bled endlessly. The city's labyrinth beckoned to her. She could wait no longer. She slipped out of the room, sliding into King's Landing's narrow streets like a whisper of smoke. She walked with her head down, shoulders hunched, imitating the thousands of beggars and orphans that inhabited these warrens. No one paused to speak to her. The city was a tempest of grudges, trades, whores, and black market deals. She glimpsed gold cloaks here and there, swaggering around corners, but they paid her no mind. She was no one worth noticing. Over the next days, in between the errands the Hound dragged her on to meet unsavory contacts. Arya learned how to move and see and listen in this place. She was smaller, nimbler. She could slip into the Red Keep's courtyards at dusk, scuttle across the rooftops, observe the comings and goings of lords and ladies. She watched how the tension of war pressed itself against the city walls, how the new queen, whoever sat the throne now, amid the swirl of Targaryen claims and Lannister remains, tried to maintain order with fear and a battered kind of hope. She heard the name Daenerys spoken in hushed tones, uncertain if she still ruled after certain betrayals. The details changed depending on who was whispering. But in the midst of that confusion, men and women sought to strengthen their own positions, hiring sellswords, spies, and assassins. This was the moment the Hound had counted on. He found an inroad with a minor official in the Red Keep, a man named Galen Pikewood. Rumors said he was a toad with coin to spend and no scruples about how to spend it. So one evening, after enough cheap ale to embolden himself, Sandor told Arya they would pay Galen a visit. The official kept an office in a tower near Maegor's Holdfast. They slipped through a side entrance, used some contacts the Hound had re-established from his days in service to the Lannisters. Whether from gold or intimidation, the door wardens let them through. The tower was dimly lit. They found Galen in a high-back chair, half-dozing by candlelight. He startled awake at the sight of the huge man and the slight girl. "Seven hells," he hissed, fumbling with the tumbler of wine in his hand. "Who are you?" Sandor pulled back his hood. The soft glow of candles illuminated the thick ridge of scarring that cut across his face. Galen's eyes widened in recognition. "The Hound," he breathed, fear mixing with awe. "I thought you were, dead," finished Sandor, stepping closer, his voice as menacing as ever. "Almost, but I'm alive enough to do some work. Heard you pay well for discreet tasks." Galen recovered quickly. He gestured at an unoccupied chair as if welcoming an old friend. "And who's this?" His eyes flicked to Arya. She remained silent. Her presence was unsettling in a way no one could immediately articulate. It was the stillness in her posture, the way her eyes seemed to see too much. "My partner," the Hound said. "Not a child to be trifled with. But we'll get to that." The official cleared his throat, smoothing the front of his robes. He was sweating slightly, but he wore the expression of a man who believed he still had some control. "These are uncertain times, as you well know," he said carefully, swirling his wine. "The king's city is now a nest of quarrels. What's left of the Lannister loyalists are scattered. Some cling to the new Targaryen regime, others are biding their time. The truth is, certain enemies undermine the stability of the crown from within. That is where men of your caliber might help." Arya felt the old coldness coil inside her. The crown. It had been worn by the monster boy king who killed her father, by the cunning creature who orchestrated so much devastation in the realm, by men and women who did nothing but look after their own power. The crown was a wretched prize that cost too many innocent lives. Still, she kept silent, letting the Hound do the talking. Sandor nodded slowly. "Name the job, we'll talk coin. But I don't come cheap." Galen's mouth curved into a thin smile. "There are a few specific troublemakers. Highborn ones who think themselves untouchable. They gather in secret to plot sedition, treason, crimes punishable by death. However, the crown does not wish to cause a stir by executing noblemen in the public square just yet. It might inspire more rebellion than it suppresses." "And you want me to handle them quietly?" Sandor said, his tone flat. "Yes." The official took another sip of wine. "Eliminate them quietly and efficiently. We make it seem like unfortunate accidents. Then King's Landing grows calmer and the crown pays your weight in gold." "You'll never pay my weight," the Hound sneered. "But I'll do it if the coin is good and half is paid in advance." Galen wrung his hands, eyes flicking to Arya again. "What about her? What services does she bring?" It was Arya who answered. "I can be places you can't. I kill clean," she said softly, her voice calm as winter wind. Something in Galen's posture changed. "Yes," he said, uncertain. "That might be helpful indeed. You have a name, girl?" She hesitated, feeling the ghosts of her old identity swirling around her. The girl who had once been Arya Stark, the wolf, the child of Winterfell. So many identities had fallen away from her like torn, discarded cloaks. "At last," she said, "I'm no one." She paused, glancing at the Hound. "Or you can call me Mercy if you like." The official frowned, but Sandor only grunted in what might have been amusement. "We'll be in touch," he told Galen. "Send word to the inn in Flea Bottom." Then, without waiting for a response, he turned on his heel and strode out. Arya followed, footsteps silent. They made a formidable pair, bound by an unspoken understanding. That night, under the partial moon, they slipped back into the wretched inn and sat by the half-dead fire. The Hound stared at the flickering embers. "So," he growled, "we're hired knives for the new lot of scum in charge. You ready for that?" Arya's gaze flicked to him, her expression unreadable. She remembered the monstrous moment her father had died, the heads on spikes, the screams in the Red Keep. A savage acceptance of her new reality settled in her. There was no place for illusions anymore. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." He spat into the fireplace, a habit she had noticed when he was uneasy. "I don't like these schemers. They'll try to cheat us or turn us in when they're done. But for now, it's better than starving on the streets. And maybe it's not so bad having a reason to keep that kill list of yours shorter by a few enemies." She said nothing to that. She was thinking of other names still etched in her mind. She had no illusions that half of them were already dead or scattered to the winds. But the thirst for vengeance remained. Their first task arrived on a rainy evening when a runner from Galen Pikewood appeared, soaked to the bone, delivering a small piece of parchment. The missive was coded, but simple enough. It named a certain Lord Benfry Mullendor, rumored to be raising funds in secret for a rebellious faction. He was to be silenced before the week's end. The Hound scowled at the parchment, then handed it to Arya. She skimmed it, feeling that old emptiness bloom in her chest. Another life taken. Another debt claimed. She nodded and tore the parchment to bits before tossing it into the hearth. The flames consumed the message, flickering bright for a moment before returning to sullen coals. Finding Mullendor's patterns was not difficult. The Red Keep was full of whisperers, and Coin greased enough palms to discover that the man liked to visit a certain brothel near the Street of Silk. He would linger there, being pampered by girls he thought beneath him, then ride back to his manse in the city's upscale district. There was a corner near the manse gates, thick with shadows after nightfall. They watched from afar, gauging the comings and goings, memorizing the shift changes of the private guards. On the third night, when the moon was veiled behind thick clouds, Mullendor stepped out of his litter, tucking his cloak tight against the drizzle. His guards, bored and half-drunk, did not react swiftly to the silent shape that slipped from the darkness. Arya was upon them before their eyes could widen. Her short blade plunged into the first man's throat. She darted around the second guard, twisting under his clumsy sword arm, sliding needle between his ribs. Their bodies struck the slick cobbles with meaty thuds. Mullendor staggered back, mouth agape. She saw the terror in his face, that awful clarity that this was the last night of his life. His hands fumbled inside his cloak, and she glimpsed a small dagger. She moved faster, lunging, hooking his leg to send him sprawling. As he fell, she pinned his wrist with her knee and placed the tip of her steel at his eye. The breath rasped in his throat. Who? He choked out. Why? She offered no name, no explanation. In one brutal thrust, she ended him. As his body went limp, she rose, wiping her blade on his cloak. Rain dripped from the edges of her hair, mingling with droplets of someone else's blood. She searched him and took a signet ring, proof of the deed. In the gloom beyond, the Hound stepped from behind a wagon where he had watched, ready to intervene if something went wrong. But nothing had gone wrong. Arya was not the scared child she once was. She killed with an assassin's precision, guided by the echo of all she had lost. They faded into the labyrinth of streets, leaving Mullendor's corpse to the night. The next morning, a terrified squire discovered the body. By midday, rumors of the murder rippled through the city. The watch found no leads. The crown remained conspicuously silent. Galen paid them with a heavy purse of gold coins. The Hound counted them, shrugged, and passed a few coins to Arya. She stared at their dull gleam. Wealth? Payment for blood. It felt heavier than anything she'd held before except for her sword. In the weeks that followed, one name after another came scrawled on scraps of parchment. Lesser lords, wealthy merchants, men suspected of feeding information to traders. Each time, Arya studied them, planned the kill, and carried it out with the Hound's watchful eye hovering in the background. They were methodical, leaving few clues behind, ensuring each target was found in a humiliating or frightening manner that stoked fear in the hearts of others. Galen, seeing the efficiency of his new hires, grew bolder. He suggested Arya and Sandor guard certain gatherings in the Red Keep, standing as silent sentinels in alcoves or hidden corridors, ready to dispatch any potential threat. There's talk of a meltdown in the city, Galen confided one afternoon, mopping sweat from his brow. They say the Targaryen queen is losing her grip on certain factions. The faith militant is stirring again. If we do not keep these rebel sympathies crushed, we may be looking at a total collapse. Sandor only grunted, his expression closed. Arya could feel that the Hound cared little for who sat the throne. He had seen kings and queens rise and fall. For him, it was about survival. For her, it was about something else. An intangible sense that every dagger stroke she dealt might carve a step closer to avenging her family. She was well aware that none of her official targets so far were directly connected to the Red Wedding. Still, King's Landing was where Lannister power once rooted itself. The city's beating heart was lined with shadows of her past. Maybe, in that labyrinth, she would find her own brand of justice. Their presence in the Red Keep became more frequent. Galen arranged for them to stay in a cramped guardroom within the castle's labyrinthine passageways, away from prying eyes. Officially, they were on retainer for special tasks. The gold cloaks recognized the Hound, some with grudging respect, some with fear. No one recognized Arya, masked as she was by battered leathers, hood, and a name no one questioned. But she recognized the corridors, the great hall, the courtyard. Sometimes she would pause, heart pounding, seeing ghosts of her father's face. The memory clung to her, a bruise that never faded. Yet she never wavered. She had chosen this path, to stay with the Hound, to slip into the belly of the beast and kill from within. One evening, they were stationed in a hidden gallery overlooking a meeting of the small council. Arya pressed herself into the shadows, feeling her break. Catch at the sight of the dais below. A woman with silver-gold hair presided over the council, though not quite sitting on the Iron Throne. A hush fell on the room as she addressed the councilors. Arya recognized her from rumors and from glimpses around the Red Keep, the Dragon Queen, Daenerys Targaryen, who had come to claim her birthright. The supply lines are threatened in the west, she was saying, her voice carrying the accent of Essos, though tempered by years traveling the Dothraki Sea and beyond. And there is no sign the lords there will yield. We must preserve peace in the city first and foremost. I will not rule over a graveyard. A tall knight with a long, narrow face spoke next, cautioning about the possible infiltration of traitors. Another counselor worried about the Iron Fleet. Around and around it went, concerns about the security of the realm, the need for alliances. Arya watched with an impassive stare, feeling the swirl of politics that had devoured her father. For a moment, she wondered what would have happened if Ned Stark had bent the knee to another Targaryen decades ago. Would any of this have been avoided? The question floated away, replaced by cold reality. She was here not to question, but to serve as a hidden blade. Below, Daenerys rose to her feet, concluding the session. Counselors dispersed. Some lingered to speak privately, others trailed after the queen as she left the hall. Arya felt the Hound's presence behind her, a silent sentinel. He touched her shoulder briefly, emotion telling her they were done for the night. In that moment, she recalled how easy it would be to slip down the stairs, approach the queen from behind, end her rule with a single thrust. Many times, men in power had died from such small, hidden angles. But that was not their contract, nor was it Arya's target. She stepped away as silently as she had come. Night after night, they performed their duties, executed quietly the enemies Galen named. Soon enough, the hush around the city grew tense. Seditious whispers died out, replaced by murmurs of a hidden assassin who stalked the streets. Some said it was a ghost. Others said it was the return of the faceless men. Arya smirked at that rumor. She knew enough to pass as one, but she was not truly bound to the House of Black and White anymore. But with success came risk. Rival factions within the Red Keep noticed the pattern of suspicious deaths, and rumors seeped among courtiers that the crown was employing a shadowy killer. Gold Cloaks began investigating with renewed vigor. One night, as Arya was returning from a job, she noticed a subtle shift, more patrols, more suspicion, more pointed questions. If these men discovered who she was or realized who the Hound was, trouble would rain down on them. She weighed the risks, but the Hound seemed unconcerned. They'll not sniff out anything. The ones who matter are on our side, he growled. Yet Galen Pikewood was not the only man in the Red Keep who had secrets. In the corridors of the royal fortress, Varys's old network of little birds still fluttered in some capacity. The rumors said the spider himself was gone. Peter Baelish was nowhere to be seen dead, Arya had heard. But spies and informers never truly vanished. One such shadow took notice of the Hound's hulking presence and the silent slip of a girl in worn leathers. Whispers reached the ears of a highborn figure who had reasons to despise the Stark name and everything it stood for. Before long, an order was quietly issued: find out who these killers truly were. Late one evening, after Arya and Sandor had completed a job eliminating a merchant rumor to be funneling coin to rebellious sellswords, the pair retired to their small guardroom in the Red Keep. The night was quiet, the corridors deserted. Neither of them noticed the watchers lurking in the gloom. Arya stepped into the cramped space, exhausted. Her muscles ached. She lit a small candle, setting it on a rickety table. The Hound followed, shutting the door with a heavy thud. He muttered something about the stench in the corridors, about how everything in King's Landing reeked of shit. Then, a subtle scraping outside caught his attention. He exchanged a glance with Arya. She nodded, stepping back into the corner where the candlelight didn't reach. Sandor swung open the door. Standing there, feigning casualness, were two men wearing the livery of the Gold Cloaks. They offered stiff smiles, hands hovering near the pommels of their swords. Evening, one guard said. Mind if we have a word? Sandor filled the doorway, arms crossed. About what? Routine check, said the guard. We've had complaints of suspicious individuals in this part of the keep, late at night. The Crown wants to ensure everyone here is who they say they are. The Hound bared his teeth in something approximating a grin. You calling me suspicious, boy? The guard's face twitched. No, sire, just doing my duty. Lord Galen gave you permission to stay, but we'd like to confirm a few things. He tried to peer past Sandor into the small room. Got a companion in there? Sandor shrugged, making no move to open the door wider. Aye. She's with me. May we speak to her? Arya let out a breath. The Hound shifted slightly, just enough for the guards to glimpse her shape in the gloom. One of them lifted a lantern, the glow revealing the faint lines of her face. The man frowned. You're a bit young for a guard, he said, the words sharper than curiosity. Arya forced a small grin. I'm old enough to open your throat if you need proof. The Hound snorted a rough laugh. She's here on Galen's coin, same as me. You have a problem with that, you take it up with him directly. The other guard scowled, suspicious but uncertain. How do you come to serve the crown, girl? Arya's stomach tightened. She kept her voice low, cold. I served a faceless god across the narrow sea. Now I serve whoever pays me. That's all you need to know. The first guard made a face, half believing, half intimidated. He shifted his weight. We don't want trouble. Just making sure we all serve the same cause. He paused. If you see anything suspicious, let us know. There's talk that the king's enemies still lurk among us. Enemies of the crown. Arya repeated the phrase like a mockery. I'll keep my eyes open. The second guard cleared his throat. All right then. Just remember, if you cause trouble. Sandor's stare could have peeled paint off stone. You think I don't know the cost of trouble? Get out of my sight. Their bravado shriveled and the guards retreated, muttering to each other as they moved away down the corridor. Sandor waited until their footsteps faded before he shut the door again. He turned to see Arya exhaling slowly, her tension slipping away. Bloody nuisance, he growled. We'll have to watch our backs more carefully. She nodded, annoyance and a flicker of worry in her eyes. But a strange certainty grew in her heart. She had survived in the darkness before, and she would do so again. The city's labyrinth of secrets and shifting alliances was just another battlefield. She reminded herself that if push came to shove, she could vanish, find a new face, a new identity. But something kept her here, bound to the Hound, bound to this path. Perhaps it was the intangible sense that her vengeance was not yet complete. She could not leave King's Landing until she had taken everything she needed from it. Days turned into weeks, and the kills mounted. In the Red Keep, she moved like a silent wraith through corridors known only to servants. She listened to confessions whispered in corners, gleaned valuable knowledge of who planned what treachery. Sometimes she reported it to the Hound, who would pass it along to Galen. Sometimes she kept it to herself, uncertain how best to use it. One night, in a hidden corner of the Keep's library, she eavesdropped on a conversation between two lesser lords. They spoke in hushed tones about the North, about rumors that a Stark had reclaimed Winterfell. Arya's heart hammered in her chest. She pressed closer, straining to hear. They say the bastard holds it, the one called Snow, the older man said. Jon Snow, king in the North, if you believe the rumors. He's forging alliances with the wildlings, can you imagine that? The second Lord sighed. Perhaps it's for the best. The threat from beyond the wall was real once. The realm is fractured, we have no strength for more war. Their words drifted away. Arya swallowed against the sudden surge of feeling inside her. Jon. Alive. A king in the North. She remembered him as a brother who loved her, who gave her needle, who tried to help her feel less alone in a world that valued Sansa's ladylike virtues. If he was truly king in the North, had he avenged Robb? Had any justice come for the traitors who orchestrated the Red Wedding? The swirl of questions left her dizzy. She retreated into the gloom, her mind churning. She realized how far she had drifted from the wolf she once was now that she took orders from men like Galen Pikewood, killing for coin as though she had no rightful cause beyond the next contract. Was she so consumed by her personal vendetta that she had forgotten the family she might still have left? She told none of these thoughts to the Hound. He would sneer at them or else break her illusions with harsh words. She buried it down, waiting for an opportunity for clarity. Yet that knowledge changed something inside her. A seed of hope or perhaps a pang of loyalty to a Stark name she had believed nearly gone. Meanwhile, the palace intrigues thickened. Galen was not the only official employing kill squads. Another faction emerged, led by a sly noblewoman named Lady Tanda Gower, who had set up her own network of spies and saboteurs. Bodies began appearing in the alleyways, men rumored to be Galen's allies. The tension crackled as though the city itself might catch fire from all the unseen blades in the night. One morning, Galen summoned Arya and Sandor to a cramped solar in the keep. His face was gray, lined with stress. We have a bigger problem, he said, voice tremulous. Lady Tanda has discovered that I've been orchestrating these clandestine activities. She's threatened to expose me to the Queen unless I step down. If Daenerys learns of this private campaign, she might have my head. She claims she wants peace, but I don't trust her lenience. Arya leaned against the wall, arms crossed, while the Hound listened with a bored expression. And what do you want us to do about it? Sandor asked. Galen's lips trembled. Lady Tanda must be silenced or at least frightened into leaving King's Landing. But she's well guarded and she's no fool. She travels with a retinue of at least 10 men. I can't risk an open confrontation. It must be discreet but definitive. He paused, swallowing. Perhaps you can strike at her when she's least expecting it tonight at her manse outside the city walls. She keeps a small estate there. I've arranged for part of the watch to be diverted, but it won't be easy. Arya's gaze flicked to Sandor. He gave the barest nod, which meant a job was a job. Fine, the Hound said. We'll handle her. But your pockets better be filled with gold for this one. Galen nearly sagged with relief. Whatever you wish. Just make sure she's dealt with. If she remains alive, ensure she's too afraid to speak. Sandor and Arya left the solar. In the corridor, he muttered, we best scout that estate first. Could be we'll have to kill half her guard if things go sour. Arya pressed her lips into a thin line. She felt the faint swirl of conflict in her chest. But she recalled the nights when Lady Tanda's men had murdered Galen's allies in the city. None of these lords and ladies were truly innocent. This was the Game of Thrones, and everyone was apiece. "Let's just get it done," she said. They departed the city at dusk, wearing dark cloaks. They exited through a less guarded gate, slipping silver to a watchman who recognized the Hound from previous deals. The road outside King's Landing was quiet, the horizon painted with the dying colors of sunset. They walked on foot, leading a borrowed horse that carried a small supply of arrows, swords, and a crossbow. The Hound insisted on the crossbow, though Arya disliked it. She preferred the closeness of a blade. The estate was a modest structure perched near a bend in the Blackwater Rush, a short ride from the city. High walls surrounded it, with a wrought iron gate guarded by 2 men. Arya and Sandor circled the perimeter, using the gathering darkness as a cloak. Through a side orchard, they spotted a possible weak point in the wall. Arya pressed her ear to the stone, listening for guard patrols. She heard faint footfalls. "We'll have to be quick," she whispered, lips close to the Hound's ear. He nodded, hoisting her up. She scrambled over the wall with cat-like agility. On the other side, she dropped into a small courtyard lined with bushes. 2 guards ambled by, unconcerned. She pressed flat against the wall. Once they passed, she ducked behind a hedgerow, scanning the windows of the estate. Candlelight glimmered behind shuttered glass. She counted 3 men stationed near the main doors, 2 more patrolling, possibly more inside. Moments later, Sandor scaled the wall. He landed softly for a man of his size, though a grunt of pain escaped his scarred lips. The old wound from the fight with Brienne sometimes troubled him. Arya touched his arm, a silent question. He brushed her off, nodding that he was fine. They crept along the hedges, moving closer to the manor. From a side door, a robed figure emerged, carrying a bucket of scraps toward what must have been a stable or kennel. Arya tensed, but the figure disappeared around a corner, never noticing them. The courtyard fell silent again. Arya signaled to Sandor. They moved to a small window that lay half ajar. Arya slipped her fingers under the ledge, easing it open further, mindful of squeaks. Then she hoisted herself inside. She landed in a dim pantry, nose assaulted by the smell of flour and stale spices. No one was present. She pushed the door open an inch, checking the corridor. Torches flickered against stone walls. A bored-looking guard leaned against the far wall, picking at his nails. Arya turned back, beckoning the Hound inside. He squeezed through, cursing softly at the tight fit. They advanced along the corridor, pausing whenever the guard shifted. Then, with lethal suddenness, the Hound lunged forward, catching the man's mouth to stifle any cry. Arya's blade slid between his ribs with practiced efficiency. The guard sagged, life fleeing his body in seconds. Sandor lowered him gently to the floor, leaving only a faint smear of blood. They pressed on, heading deeper into the estate. Arya counted tapestries, doorways, and windows, forming a mental map. Muffled voices drifted from a room at the far end. Drawing closer, they crouched behind an ornate wooden bench. Lady Tandagower was inside, speaking in hushed yet urgent tones with a handful of retainers. Arya risked a quick peek. She saw 4 men with her, 2 in partial armor, 2 unarmored but armed with daggers. Lady Tanda herself was richly dressed in a plum-colored gown, her hair twisted in elaborate braids. She was pacing, clearly agitated. "I won't let that worm Pykewood best me," Lady Tanda was saying. "He thinks he can quietly remove us one by one, but I have evidence. I have letters that tie him directly to unsanctioned killings in the city. Once I bring them before the Queen, he'll be done for." One of the armored men stepped forward. "My lady, perhaps we should flee tonight just to be safe. If Pykewood suspects..." Lady Tanda held up a hand, her face hardening. "No, I'm done running. The Queen claims to want justice. Let her see the proof of this black-hearted campaign. We're leaving at dawn to present the letters in person." Arya sensed the moment passing like a breath of wind. They had only one chance. She exchanged a silent glance with the Hound, who nodded. They stepped out from behind the bench, weapons drawn, advancing swiftly. The first guard shouted in alarm, raising his sword. The The second guard scrambled, trying to push Lady Tanda behind him. The unarmored retainers yanked daggers free, but their stance was unsteady. The Hound moved with brutal efficiency, deflecting the first guard's sword strike with his own broad blade. He lunged in, smashing an elbow into the guard's face. Blood sprayed. Arya simultaneously rushed the second guard, weaving low to avoid his slash, plunging needle into his thigh. He snarled, staggering back. One of the unarmored men lunged at Arya. She pivoted, slicing across his belly. He collapsed with a gurgling scream. Lady Tanda backed up, eyes wild, her shriek echoing off the walls. The Hound kicked the wounded guard aside, but that guard managed to sweep his blade upward. Sandor hissed as steel nicked his forearm, but his rage made him unstoppable. He hammered the guard's skull with the hilt of his sword. The man crumpled. The second unarmored retainer rushed the Hound with a desperate cry, slashing a dagger. Sandor caught his wrist with iron force and twisted until bones snapped. The retainer wailed, and the Hound's sword ended him. Panting in the sudden stillness, they found Lady Tanda cornered by the fireplace. Blood spattered the floor, the once elegant room reeking of death. Tanda's face twisted in fear and fury, tears streaking her painted cheeks. "You animals," she spat. "Hired knives, slithering in the dark. You'll pay for this." Sandor angled his sword at her. "You've made enemies, my lady." "My suggestion? Shut up." But she wasn't cowed. Her eyes darted to a side table where a small crossbow lay half-concealed under a cloth. She lunged for it, a desperate attempt. Arya saw it coming. She stepped in with lethal speed, slamming the side of her blade onto Tanda's forearm. The woman yelped, dropping the crossbow. She stumbled, cradling her arm. Arya placed needle at her throat, forcing her back against the wall. Lady Tanda's breath heaved. Rage and terror roared in her eyes. "Go on, do it," she hissed. "Kill me. You'll never stop the truth." "Those letters?" Her words cut off as the Hound pressed closer. "Letters? Where?" Tanda bared her teeth. "Why would I tell you?" Arya applied more pressure with her sword, drawing a thin line of blood along Tanda's pale skin. "Where?" she demanded. A frantic light flickered in Lady Tanda's eyes. She jerked her chin toward a writing desk across the room, behind an overturned chair. "There. They're sealed in the drawer." Sandor moved quickly, rummaging through the desk, pushing aside quills and ink. He found a sheaf of parchment bearing the royal sigil along with some smaller slips scrawled with details of the assassinations Galen had ordered. He whistled low. "If these get to the Queen, Galen's done. And us with him." Arya swallowed. She thought about the scale of all this. The hidden war in King's Landing, the quiet murders that she and the Hound had carried out. She had told herself it was just part of a game that would eventually lead to her vengeance. But in the cold lamplight, she felt a tiny pang of regret. Another wave of blood in a sea of it. Lady Tanda seized the moment of Arya's distraction. She twisted sideways, pushing needle away from her throat, and screamed for help. Her voice tore the hush of the night. Arya cursed, stepping in to silence her. But the door burst open, revealing two more guards alerted by the commotion. They raised crossbows, eyes going wide at the carnage. The Hound threw himself behind an upended table. Arya yanked Lady Tanda sideways, using the woman's body as a shield. The guards hesitated, not wanting to shoot their lady. That hesitation cost them their lives. Arya flung Lady Tanda aside and dropped to a crouch as the Hound surged upward, letting a throwing axe spin through the air. It lodged in the first guard's chest. The second guard fired, but the bolt missed wide, clattering against stone. Sandor roared, crossing the room in 2 strides, burying his sword in the guard's gut. Silence crashed down. Lady Tanda, dazed from being tossed aside, scrabbled for the crossbow on the floor. Arya acted without thought. She brought needle's pommel down on the noblewoman's temple. Lady Tanda dropped, unconscious, a thin line of blood trickling across her brow. The retort of the blow echoed. Arya drew a breath, trying to steady her racing heart. In the space of a few seconds, the room had become a slaughterhouse. Sandor was breathing hard, leaning against a wall. He yanked the throwing axe free from the dead guard's chest. 7 hells, he growled. Galen said she had 10 men. I'm counting at least 8 dead. The others might be outside. We need to finish this quickly. Arya glanced at Lady Tanda's limp form. We're supposed to kill her? Her voice was grim, resigned. The original orders were to silence her permanently or scare her away. Right now, after all this bloodshed, letting her live seemed like a liability. She had the proof Galen feared. but Arya felt a small twinge of reluctance. This was not a soldier or a bandit, but a woman who believed she could bring justice to the queen. Sandor read the conflict in her eyes. He scowled. We do the job, or we might as well carve our own throats. Galen's not going to let her walk free with that evidence. Come on. He stepped toward Lady Tanda, raising his sword. Arya's gut clenched. She had murdered countless men, but standing over this unconscious woman, someone who might have wanted to do the right thing, felt different. She caught the Hound's arm. He glared at her. What? He snapped. She'll squeal the moment she's awake. She'll finger us. We'll be hunted like dogs. Arya's mind spun. If Lady Tanda was truly set on exposing Galen, maybe she was a threat. Or maybe she was telling the truth. Paikwood was orchestrating a wave of illegal killings, and Tanda had the evidence to bring him down. If Arya helped kill Tanda, she would be complicit in that cover-up. She would doom the truth to die here. Was her vengeance truly worth that? Her father had once told her that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword, but he also taught her about honor, about the difference between justice and murder. How far had she strayed? In a flash, she remembered the talk of Jon Snow reclaiming Winterfell. Of family. Of a place that might still stand for a shred of honor, however small. Another pulse of conflict lanced through her. The Hound's eyes were on her, cold and pressing. She stepped away from him, from Lady Tanda's prone form. She picked up the sheaf of incriminating letters from the desk and handed them to Sandor. Burn these, she said, her voice steady. That's all Galen needs. He wants the evidence gone. The Hound took them, confusion flitting across his scarred features. And her. Arya's face was set like stone. We leave her for the crows. If she lives, let her speak. There's no proof anymore. No one will believe her. She can't do anything without these letters. And if she tries, let Galen handle it. He's the one who started this war. Sandor weighed her words, glancing at Lady Tanda's inute form. You're taking a risk, he muttered. She slid her blade back into its sheath. If Galen wants her truly dead, he can come and kill her himself. The Hound held her gaze. For a moment, she thought he might argue, might call her soft. But then he grunted in a voice gruff with disapproval. Fine. We're leaving. But if this comes back to bite us, I'll say I told you so. They gathered themselves, wiping their blades, wiping the doorknobs to remove prints, though in truth it wouldn't matter much. The estate was full of bodies, an obvious sign of attack. They made sure the letters were taken and any sign of who they were was concealed. Then they slipped out the way they had come, climbing over the wall, disappearing into the night. They burned the letters in a discreet corner by the river. The parchments curled and blackened, smoke rising into the starless sky. Watching the last embers die, Arya felt strangely hollow. She had saved Lady Tanda's life, but had she truly done anything good? She had merely ensured Galen's secrets remained hidden, letting him continue to orchestrate the city's silent terrors. Sandor said nothing as they walked back to King's Landing. Once inside the walls, they returned to their cramped room in the Red Keep, battered from the night's ordeal. Arya sank onto the straw pallet, mind still swirling with doubt. The Hound tore a strip of cloth to bandage the cut on his arm, gritting his teeth at the sting of dried blood. We'll collect the coin tomorrow, he said, his voice subdued. That you may have made us half of what was promised if Tanda's found alive. Arya stared at the candle flame. Let that be Galen's problem. The next day, Galen summoned them to his solar. He was pale, hands shaking. She's not dead, he hissed the moment they entered. Lady Tanda was found unconscious but alive. Witnesses saw two attackers, a hulking man and a small figure. Everyone's whispering about it. He glared at the Hound. You told me you would handle it. She's still breathing. Sandor crossed his arms, his silence the weight of a threat. Arya stepped forward, her voice low. She has no evidence. It's ash by now. The Queen won't believe her word alone. She's a rival, and the city knows she's been at odds with you. That might not be enough, Galen moaned. She might gather supporters, or bribe the Watch to testify. I can't. Then finish her off yourself, Arya snapped, startling Galen into silence. We did our part. She gestured at the bandages on the Hound's arm. We left half our blood on her floors. There were more guards than you said. We destroyed the letters. Your secrets are safe. Galen stared at her, his mouth working. Then he shook his head, fumbled with a coin purse, and thrust it at the Hound. Here, your payment. But if Tanda speaks, you'll have to kill her anyway. The Hound grunted, taking the purse. We'll see. They left the solar, the tension coiling behind them like a snake. Once out of earshot, Arya blew out a breath. The halls of the Red Keep felt tighter, as though they were suffocating in a nest of deceit. Days passed. Word spread that Lady Tanda was recovering but was in a delirious state, her recollections hazy. She muttered about assassins sent by Galen Pikewood, but with no physical evidence, no letters, and her reputation stained by the rumor that she'd hired killers herself. Few were inclined to champion her cause. Galen, trembling with relief, rewarded the Hound and Arya with another bag of gold, urging them to stay ready for further tasks. But the entire ordeal left Arya unsettled. One night, as she walked alone on the ramparts overlooking Blackwater Bay, she felt the pang of longing for the north. Clouds drifted across the moon, and the city lights glimmered below like 1,000 trapped fireflies. The wind carried the smell of salt and sewage. She closed her eyes, thinking of Winterfell's crisp air, the towering pines, the sound of the old god's leaves rustling in the breeze. She felt him approach before he spoke. Sandor's footfalls were distinctive, heavy and scraping. He stopped beside her, leaning on the battlements. They gazed at the water, each lost in thought. Eventually, Arya broke the silence. "Jon might still be alive," she said softly. "King in the north, some say." He made a non-committal sound. "Good for him," was all he said at first. Then, after a moment, he muttered, "You thinking of running off to join him?" Arya didn't answer. Was she? She had stepped so far into the shadows, done so many bloody deeds, that the idea of returning to a place of relative honor felt like a dream. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe." Sandor stared across the bay. "Winter's a harsh place," he said. "Though everything's harsh in this world. At least in the north you'd have your family." He shrugged. "If that's worth anything anymore." Her throat tightened. The memories of Sansa, Bran, Rickon, Robb, her mother, her father. It was too painful to dwell on. She had closed that door to survive. But with every kill she made in King's Landing, a piece of her told her that she was forging a chain that might hold her here forever. "You don't belong in the north," she said, looking at him. "Would you come?" He snorted, giving her a half-lidded look. "Don't belong anywhere, girl. You know that." A pause, then in a lower voice, "But maybe I'm done with King's Landing someday." "Maybe not yet, but someday." They fell silent, side by side on the wall. An uneasy alliance forged by necessity turned into something else, an understanding, perhaps. Their partnership had carved a niche for them in the city, a place among the hidden power brokers. But neither truly belonged in that nest of vipers. The next day, rumors flew that Lady Tanda had been moved to a secluded location under the watch of some loyal men. Galen seethed, sending Arya and Sandor to investigate. They discovered that Tanda's cousin had taken her to a small holdfast near the Rose Road, supposedly to recover from the attack in peace. A single thrust in her sleep, Galen said, spittle flying, and we can be done with this. Sandor only glowered. "You want it done so badly? Do it yourself." Galen's face purpled. He realized too late that his best killers were not slavishly loyal. He threw them a smaller pouch of coin. "Fine. Consider this an incentive to finish the job." The Hound scoffed, leaving without a promise. Arya watched him, thoughts churning. If they refused the contract, Galen might deem them a liability. But if they carried it out, they would be little more than butchers preserving the man's power. This was the kind of moral quandary she had once imagined faced only the worst villains of the realm. Now she was in the thick of it all, in pursuit of a vengeance that felt further away by the day. A quiet tension filled their nights. The Hound said little, and Arya found herself haunted by nightmares of her father's death, the Red Wedding, the many men she had slain. More than once she woke gasping, sweat slick on her skin, the final moments of her victims echoing in her mind. She wondered if, by staying with Sandor and continuing this work, she had strayed too far from any path of honor. But she could not walk away, not yet, not when the city still held so many threads of her tangled destiny. The tipping point came unexpectedly. They arrived at the Red Keep one evening to find a small retinue of gold cloaks awaiting them in a courtyard. At their head stood a tall, stern-faced captain and a petite woman in plain clothing who wore an air of authority. Arya tensed, resting a hand on Needle. "You will come with us," the captain said, no hint of compromise in his voice. "The Queen's Council demands an audience." Arya and Sandor exchanged looks. Galen had told them nothing of this. Warily they followed, flanked by armed guards, deeper into the castle. They were led to a smaller throne room where Daenerys sometimes held less formal meetings. The air was hushed, the room lit by scores of torches. At the far side, upon a raised platform, sat the Dragon Queen herself, flanked by 2 unsullied guards. Beside her stood Missandei, who watched the newcomers with a calm, discerning gaze. Arya's heart thudded painfully. She had only seen the queen from afar. Now those piercing violet eyes rested on her and the Hound. The hush in the room was like a taut bowstring. "You have been summoned," Daenerys said. Her voice was both gentle and firm, a tone Arya found oddly reminiscent of how her father would speak when dispensing justice. "I have heard troubling reports of covert bloodshed in my city. There is a rumor that a certain official named Galen Pikewood has hired killers to eliminate those he claims are threats. I do not want to rule through fear, nor do I want open rebellion. Yet the violence continues. I would hear the truth of it from your own mouths." Sandor glared at the Unsullied, his stance tense. "And if we don't talk?" A flicker of impatience crossed Daenerys's face. "I could have you executed, but I'd rather know the depths of corruption in my court. I want to heal this realm, if possible. If you help me uncover the truth, I can be merciful." Arya's throat felt dry. She thought of Lady Tanda, half dead from the attack, the destroyed letters that would have proven Galen's guilt, the swirl of clandestine murders she had perpetrated. She had a choice. Speak, remain silent, or lie. If she spoke the full truth, she might condemn herself. But perhaps she could condemn Galen, who had so brazenly manipulated them. She glanced at the Hound, saw the set of his jaw. He was leaving the decision to her. Stepping forward, Arya felt the eyes of the Queen and everyone in the hall upon her. She remembered that she was Arya Stark of Winterfell, the blood of the wolf. Perhaps part of that identity still existed beneath the masks. "We were hired," she said, her voice steady, "by Galen Pikewood to kill men and women he claimed were traitors. We carried out those orders, until we realized he was merely eliminating rivals. He's orchestrated murders across the city. Lady Tanda found proof and she hesitated. We destroyed it at Galen's command, but she's alive still." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Daenerys's gaze sharpened. "You admit to carrying out killings on behalf of this official?" Arya nodded, jaw tight. "We were the blades he paid for, yes." Sandor stepped forward, voice gruff. "We're not the only ones. Others have done his bidding, or Lady Tanda's, or a dozen other petty lords. The city's rotting from the inside, Your Grace. We just happen to be better at it than most." An intense stillness gripped the Queen's face. "And who are you?" she asked Arya directly. "You speak with the accent of the North, but you hide your face and your name." Arya's breath trembled, but she raised her chin. "I was once Arya Stark." The hush deepened, as if no one dared to inhale. "But I am not the lady of a noble house anymore." Daenerys's eyebrows lifted slightly. She had heard rumors of the lost Stark girl. For a moment, something like sympathy flickered in her violet eyes. "Arya Stark. Your brother is Jon Snow, if the rumors are true." Arya gave a curt nod. Daenerys looked at her, weighed her. Then she looked at the Hound. "And you, Sandor Clegane, once sworn shield to Joffrey Baratheon, a Lannister dog. How did you come to stand with the daughter of Ned Stark?" He met her gaze without flinching. "War makes strange allies." A faint, humorless smile touched Daenerys's lips. She stood, addressing them in a voice meant for the entire hall. "I cannot ignore the crimes you admit to, nor can I ignore the corruption of those who hired you. But I also recognize you have information that can expose them all." She paused, looking from Arya to Sandor. "Galen Pikewood is an infection in my council. If you help me bring him to justice, perhaps I can spare you. But you must swear your truth before the throne, with me as witness." Arya's mind whirled. If they betrayed Galen, they would have to name every murder they had committed at his command. That might spare them from a worse fate, or it might doom them. Yet perhaps it was the only chance to cleanse King's Landing of men like Galen, to do something that might honor what remained of the Stark name. She had not expected the moment to come so swiftly, but now that it was here, she felt a grim kind of clarity. She looked at Sandor. He scowled, but gave a small shrug, as if to say, "This is your call, girl. We do this or we go down." Arya turned back to the Queen. "We'll testify," she said, her voice firm. "We'll show you all of Galen's hidden strings." The Queen inclined her head. "Then you will come under my protection. But be warned, if you lie, or if you continue your killings without my sanction, you will face my wrath." I have dragons, Sandor Clegane, Arya Stark. This city can burn in a heartbeat if I will it. They both nodded, each battered by their own regrets. The hush was thick as the guards escorted them to a side chamber where they would await the hearing. Once alone, Sandor exhaled a curse. You realize this might get us killed? Arya pressed her palms against her eyes, exhaustion rolling over her. We've been marked for death 100 times. If the queen wants to punish us, so be it. I'm done being a hired blade for scum like Galen. She thought of her father, of the honor he tried to carry to his grave. Maybe this was, in some twisted way, a step toward being the wolf she was born to be instead of a faceless killer. Sandor leaned back, letting out a gruff chuckle. You've grown, girl. Maybe I'm impressed, or maybe we're just both damn fools. She managed a small, wry smile in return, though the future remained shrouded in uncertainty. In the flickering torchlight, she saw the reflection of someone no longer a frightened girl, nor a nameless assassin. She was Arya Stark, and she was not done fighting. That night, behind closed doors, rumors whispered that the Hound and the Stark girl had turned on Galen Pikewood, that the queen was about to lay bare a corruption that had festered too long. Some said the city would soon see High Lords stripped of their titles, perhaps even the return of honorable justice. Others predicted that more blood would stain the stones, that men like Galen would fight to keep their power. What no one disputed was that King's Landing stood on the brink of yet another shift in the game, one that had begun, in part, because a broken killer and a vengeful wolf decided to stand up for something beyond murder. And so, as dawn broke, Sandor Clegane and Arya Stark prepared themselves to stand before the court to reveal the twisted truth about King's Landing's silent war. Fear churned in Arya's gut, fear of consequences, fear of the queen's wrath, fear of what lay ahead. But beneath it all was a glimmer of resolute defiance. She was no longer the girl who fled in terror when her father lost his head. She was the wolf who had walked through fire and blood, and she had found her voice again. She would not be silent. She would stand guard over her own destiny, and if she needed to slay rivals while guarding this twisted city from within, so be it. But no one would ever again tell Arya Stark whom she had to be. She would decide that herself, forging a path between the shadows and the light, between vengeance and justice, until the day her name was carved into history. If the Hound remained by her side, it would be because he, too, had chosen to defy the cycle that had once devoured him. Together, they were a blade pointed at the black hearts hidden in the city's depths. Perhaps King's Landing could never truly be saved, but at least they might carve out a space where the innocent could draw breath. And if that was not possible, then let the city tremble at their approach, for a wolf and a hound unleashed could tear apart the entire realm if they so willed it. Such was the end of one night's chapter in the endless story of Blood A. ND Thrones. A harsh morning awaited them. Their fate was uncertain, perched on the razor's edge. But for now, they embraced that uncertainty, hearts hardened by loss, eyes keen to the dangers ahead. And when the hour came to walk into the queen's presence, neither bowed their head in shame, for they had chosen this path with clear eyes. They were the watchers in darkness, the hidden blades, but no longer slaves to any master but themselves. And that perhaps was the closest thing to freedom they had ever known. At dawn, the corridors of the Red Keep felt colder than they had in weeks. An unnatural hush clung to the torchlit walls as if the very stones were holding their breath in anticipation of what would unfold. Guards ushered Arya Stark and Sandor Clegane from their cramped quarters, flanking them with unsmiling faces. They led the two through winding passageways and up stairwells until they reached a set of carved doors that seemed far too ornate for a city so stained by death. Beyond them lay the smaller throne room where Daenerys Targaryen often held her more intimate hearings. Arya walked with her head high. She was no lord's daughter arrayed in finery, yet she carried herself with a grim resolve that turned heads. Her leathers were clean but battered, her dark hair tied back in a simple braid. The Hound paced beside her, larger than life, flexing his fists in a way that betrayed his readiness to fight if needed. She could sense tension radiating off him. They were both stepping into a den of power where words, not steel, would decide their fate, or so they hoped. Inside, torchlight cast flickering shadows on the stones. The queen stood on a small raised platform, not on the Iron Throne, but before it as if prepared to address them directly. Missandei waited at her right, composed and watchful. Two Unsullied stood like statues near the rear. Several members of Daenerys's council had gathered, a few knights in Targaryen colors, the tall captain of the city's watch, and a handful of minor officials. Among them, looking uneasy and determined to hide it, was Galen Pikewood. Arya recognized the lines of tension in his face, the forced set of his mouth. He was dressed in his finest doublet, dark velvet stitched with golden thread, his hair neatly combed and oiled. Arya's heart pounded. Today, she and the Hound would have to lay bare the truth of Galen's corruption. Yet Galen himself was not the type to let such accusations pass quietly. He might attempt to discredit them to twist their confessions. It was not lost on Arya that Daenerys could, with a mere nod, order both her and Sandor executed for the murders they had already admitted to. She glanced at the Hound, but his gaze was fixed on Galen. A silent, barely contained fury smoldered there. A herald announced them in a reedy voice, presenting Sandor Clegane and the girl Arya of House Stark. A ripple went through those assembled. A few people exchanged uncertain looks. Perhaps they had imagined Arya would arrive cowed, meek, but she did not bend or kneel, and the queen made no move to demand it. Daenerys's gaze traveled from Arya to the Hound and then over to Galen, who stood a short distance from her. "We are here to uncover the truth," the queen said, addressing the hall. Her words carried the crisp edge of command. "Galen Pikewood, you stand accused of orchestrating a covert campaign of murders in King's Landing, employing assassins to remove your rivals and any who challenged your designs. Sandor Clegane and Arya Stark have confessed to taking your coin in furtherance of these crimes. Yet they claim you deceived them, that your targets were not necessarily traitors to the crown, but people you wish to eliminate for your own ends." Galen took a small step forward, pressing a hand to his breast in a show of wounded dignity. "Your Grace," he said, bowing low, "I have served at the Red Keep since the fall of Cersei's regime. My loyalty is to you, to your rightful rule. It is true I have utilized discreet methods to protect the city, but only under the weight of necessity. Many of these so-called rivals were undermining the crown, plotting sedition in dark corners of the city. Their guilt was evident. If you read the reports, you would see they conspired with foreign interests or funded rebellious sellswords. I only acted in the best interest of the realm." Daenerys's face did not shift from its stern composure. "And what of Lady Tanda Gower, whose estate was attacked, her guards slaughtered?" At that name, a hush spread. Galen's lips tightened. Lady Tanda was part of a treasonous circle, forging alliances with unnamed pretenders who sought to challenge your reign. She was determined to sow chaos, to gather evidence against me. Yes, but only to conceal her own machinations. My intention was to bring her to justice, quietly, so as not to alarm the city or burden your grace with lesser concerns. Arya forced herself not to shout. Lies, twisted half-truths, carefully spun to sound plausible. She stepped forward before Galen could continue. "Lady Tanda discovered proof that you were paying hired blades to kill anyone who opposed you, no matter whether they truly plotted against the crown. You used the city's fear as a cover for your personal vendettas. I've seen letters detailing your instructions, the names you demanded we eliminate. Your gold paid for more than just our blades." She felt dozens of eyes fix on her. Some were wide with suspicion, others with a flicker of belief. Daenerys's expression remained unreadable. At her side, Missandei took note of Arya's words, ready to keep track of every revelation. "And what evidence do you have now?" Galen countered. "If there were letters, I've heard that they were destroyed, burned. Lady Tanda's claims have no foundation. Perhaps these two killers fear punishment for their crimes, so they're naming me as a scapegoat." The Hound stepped forward with a growl. "You lying little worm. We did what you hired us to do, and you paid us. You left a trail of corpses in your wake, and you're not man enough to own up to it. If the Queen wants to see the truth of it, she can talk to the guards who survived the attack on Tanda's estate, those who heard Lady Tanda call out your name." One of the minor officials, a thin man with a watery stare, cleared his throat nervously. "Your Grace, if I may speak." Daenerys gave a slight nod, and he continued, eyes flicking uneasily between Galen and Arya. "I know there have been rumors swirling in the keep that Pikewood was using certain mercenaries to remove political obstacles. I did not witness it directly, but many whispered that men close to him boasted of coin made through clandestine killings. Some of these men turned up dead themselves shortly thereafter." Galen's face twitched. He pointed an accusatory finger at Arya. "She is a killer, Your Grace, raised in the shadows, practicing the arts of faceless men. Why else would she serve me if not for coin? She's manipulating you, lying to escape the noose. And she's not even using her real name. How can we trust a girl who claims to be Arya Stark?" A ripple passed through the onlookers at the mention of Arya's possible link to the faceless men. Across the hall, a knight in Targaryen colors stepped closer, hand on his sword's pommel as though preparing for trouble. Arya felt her heart pound. Galen was cunning. He understood that any association with the House of Black and White might paint her as a threat. People in Westeros feared the unknown skills of Braavos' assassins. Daenerys' gaze cut sharply to Arya. Do you deny any connection to the Faceless Men? Arya swallowed. She thought of the time she'd spent across the narrow sea, the lessons she'd learned, and the illusions she'd shed. I trained with them, but I'm no longer part of their order. I left and I came back to Westeros. I came here with the Hound because my own path led me to King's Landing. Yes, I killed for him, she jerked her chin at Galen, but only because I was led to believe these were men and women plotting a second rebellion. After I learned the truth, I wanted no part in it. The queen seemed to study her for a moment, those violet eyes intense and unyielding. Then Daenerys shifted her focus to Galen. One might ask, Lord Pikewood, if you truly suspected Lady Tanda of treason, why did you not bring your concerns to me or my council openly? She was too well connected, Galen insisted. I feared that exposing her publicly would drive other traitors deeper underground. I was trying to protect your throne. My methods may have been harsh, but you must see how the end's justified. Spare us, Missandei, I said, her soft voice cutting through the hall with surprising authority. We have spoken with Lady Tanda's cousin. He claims that Tanda was gathering proof of your misdeeds to present to the queen. She was not seeking to depose her grace. She believed the queen would punish you for acting without royal sanction. Galen's fists curled at his sides. A dryness crept into his voice. Those are lies uttered by a woman half out of her mind. The attack on her estate left her delirious. Will the crown place more weight on the word of an invalid than on that of a loyal servant of the realm? A brief silence settled. Daenerys exhaled. The truth must be unraveled carefully. If Galen has indeed harbored or funded unauthorized killings, he has violated my peace. If Tanda or others were conspiring against me, that is also a threat. But the more I hear, the more I suspect you, Galen, have twisted the facts to cover your own ambition. I will have a trial, so the city may see that justice in King's Landing does not bow to secrecy. Do you deny the Queen's justice, Lord Pikewood? The man's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, then closed it again as though struggling to maintain his composure. Of course not. I welcome a trial, he forced out to clear my name of these baseless allegations. Daenerys nodded once. Very well. Sandor Clegane and Arya Stark, for now you will remain under guard in the Red Keep. You have admitted your involvement in these crimes, but you have also offered to expose the corruption that allowed them. If you speak truth, you may yet earn leniency. Should you lie or flee, you will find no mercy from me or my dragons. Arya and the Hound exchanged a glance. This was no simple resolution. They had effectively placed themselves in the hands of a queen known for her fierceness and her willingness to mete out swift punishment. But the alternative remaining as Galen's pawns was more intolerable by the day. Galen bowed deeply, but Arya did not miss the flicker of malice in his eyes when he turned away from the throne. He was cornered now, forced to stand trial. People like Galen rarely allowed themselves to be cornered without some last trick. She suspected that the days leading to the trial would be as dangerous as any infiltration mission. And she suspected too that Daenerys knew it. The hearing ended and guards escorted Arya and the Hound to a set of modest chambers deeper in the keep. These were not dungeon cells, but nor were they comfortable suites meant for honored guests. The walls were solid stone with a single narrow window that looked out over a small courtyard. 2 armed Targaryen soldiers stood outside the door. There was a single bed, a chamber pot, and a plain wooden table. Another adjacent room contained a second bed and a small hearth, presumably for the Hound. They were to be confined here unless summoned. The moment they were alone, the Hound let out a string of curses. We should have let me cut Galen's throat the day he tried to blame us for his filth. Now we're stuck in a cage. Arya sank onto her cot, her posture rigid with tension. We had no choice. If we'd killed him without proof, we'd be hunted by the Queen's men or forced to run. There's nowhere to hide from Daenerys Targaryen anymore. She has half the realm in her grip. The only way out of this is to let her see the truth. Sandor grimaced, scratching at his scarred cheek. Truth, he repeated, as though tasting something bitter. The truth is half these lords are more vile than maggots. That queen might want justice, but she'll soon learn the realm doesn't bend to justice so easily. Arya gazed at the narrow window. She recalled the swirl of rumors about Jon Snow in the north, about the fragment of family she might still have. Every day she spent trapped in King's Landing, the city of her nightmares. It felt as though her soul was caught between the memory of vengeance and the faint hope of returning to her roots. Still, she forced her thoughts away from Winterfell. This moment demanded all her focus. Galen would not hesitate to send more killers if he could. The trial was an obstacle he might try to remove before it could even begin. They spent the remainder of the day in uneasy confinement. Servants brought simple meals. The guard at the door refused to let them wander the keep. They were, however, permitted to stretch their legs in the courtyard visible from the window, under heavy watch. Late in the afternoon, Arya walked there, boots crunching over gravel, while two stony-faced Targaryen men followed at a distance. The sky overhead was a pale winter blue, the sun casting watery light on the walls. She tried to banish the claustrophobic sense that the city was closing in, that some threat would leap at her from every shadow. Toward evening, Missandei came to speak with them. She was escorted by a single unsullied guard, though Arya suspected there were more watchers posted discreetly. Missandei's posture was upright, but Arya saw concern in her eyes, concern for what was brewing in the Red Keep. "I am here at the Queen's bidding," Missandei began gently. "She wishes to glean as many details as possible before the trial. If you have anything that might corroborate your claims, now is the time to present it. Once Galen has time to gather his resources, he'll doubtless mount a defense." Arya exchanged a glance with Sandor. "We burned many of the letters, but there are people who can attest to Galen's involvement. Servants, a guard or two who overheard his orders. Some might be too frightened to speak, though, especially if they think he'll walk free." Missandei nodded. "Then the Queen will ensure their safety if they come forward. You must name them." The Hound gave a short laugh. "You think common folk will trust a promise from any lord or queen? The moment the wind changes, they'll find themselves in the black cells." Missandei's expression remained composed, though a sadness flitted through her eyes. "We are trying to build a new rule here, one that isn't governed by fear." Arya heard the sincerity in her tone and something in her chest twisted. She recalled the innocence she had once known, a time when she believed good rulers could bring real change to Westeros. But so many betrayals had hardened her. "It won't be easy," she said. "But if Daenerys truly wants the city to be something other than a viper's nest, exposing Galen is a start." Missandei inclined her head. "I will relay your words to her grace. The trial will be called in 5 days. Enough time for the city to prepare and gather. Galen will be given that same time to find advocates if he can. You both will be allowed to speak on your own behalf. Until then, you remain here under guard." When Missandei left, the Hound muttered about being cooped up like an old dog in a kennel. Arya remained silent, pacing the small courtyard until shadows stretched tall across the stone. She wondered if Galen might attempt to slip out of the city. But for a man who craved power, flight was unlikely. More likely, he would marshal every resource he possessed, bribing, threatening, blackmailing. The days ahead would be fraught with danger, and Galen's downfall might drag them all into the flames. That night, Arya dreamed of her father. She saw him kneeling on the steps of the Great September, the sword descending toward his neck. She tried to cry out, tried to rush forward, but her limbs moved as though submerged in thick tar. Then the moment of his death blurred, and she was no longer the child who had watched in horror. She was older now, standing at the edge of a silent courtyard, a sword in her hand, but everything was wrong. Buildings twisted at impossible angles, the sky an ashen gray. Around her lay a dozen bodies, faceless, shifting like reflections on water. She heard a voice calling her name, or perhaps 1,000 names. No one, Mercy, Cat of the Canals, the wolf. She awoke gasping, a cold sweat drenching her brow. She sat upright, listening to her heartbeat thunder in her ears. The room was dark, lit only by a small lantern left by the guards. She could hear the Hound snoring faintly in the adjacent chamber. After a moment, she rose, pulling on her boots. If she tried to lie down again, the nightmares would return, so she paced quietly from wall to wall, hugging her arms. At times, she caught herself whispering the old names on her kill list under her breath, half from habit, half from longing. Many of them were dead now: Cersei, Walder Frey. Others remained uncertain. The litany offered a perverse comfort once, but now she felt only emptiness. There was no respite in revenge. The Red Keep reminded her of that every time she set foot in its halls. Dawn arrived, slow and colorless. The first of their 5 days began. A routine established itself. A guard brought them food at dawn, they were permitted an hour in the courtyard under watch, then the midday meal, and so on. Arya spent much of the time silently brooding, turning over details in her mind. How would Galen build his defense? Would he stage a convenient accident for them before the trial? She waited for any sign that someone might attempt to slip into the courtyard or their room. The Hound, too, seemed perpetually on edge, refusing to take off his sword belt even behind locked doors. On the second day, a visitor arrived who neither Arya nor Sandor expected. Brienne of Tarth. The tall, broad-shouldered knight appeared in the courtyard, accompanied by a pair of Targaryen soldiers who wore polite but wary expressions as if uncertain how to handle her presence. Arya glimpsed her as she was finishing her allotted hour of exercise, practicing forms with a wooden sword the guards had allowed her. She froze, recalling the last time she'd seen Brienne on that narrow mountain path in the Vale, crossing steel with the Hound. That fight had ended in agony for Sandor and confusion for Arya. She had nearly left the Hound to die, but in this alternate thread of fate, she had not. And now here was Brienne again, standing a few paces away, watchful, uncertain how Arya might react. Brienne inclined her head in a faint greeting. She wore simple plate and mail, her blonde hair pulled back. "I heard you were here," she said quietly, voice carrying that earnestness Arya remembered. "The Queen's Guard told me you were confined pending a trial. I asked for permission to speak with you." Arya let out a slow breath, carefully setting down the wooden blade. She felt an odd rush of conflicting emotions, resentment, gratitude, memory. This was the knight who had tried to protect her, who had insisted that she had sworn to Catelyn Stark to keep Arya safe. But Arya, shaped by bitterness and betrayal, had never trusted her. "Why would you come?" Arya asked, not unkindly but with a note of guarded curiosity. Brienne's gaze flicked briefly to the Hound who stood near the courtyard gate. He stared back, jaw clenched, anger and old wounds etched in his scowl. "I came to see if why." "Oh, you are well," Brienne said, "and to understand why you are behind bars in the Red Keep, albeit nicer ones than a dungeon cell. Word has spread that you're embroiled in some plot to kill lords and ladies." Arya gave a hollow laugh. "Nothing so dramatic. We were hired blades. Now we're here to testify against the man who hired us, who lied about his motives." Brienne studied Arya's face. "Hired blades," she repeated softly. "That's a far cry from the child I glimpsed in the Vale." Arya's expression sharpened. "I'm no child. Not anymore." The older knight frowned, a flicker of regret crossing her features. "I didn't mean insult. It's just, I traveled half the 7 kingdoms searching for any sign of you or Sansa. I swore an oath to your mother. I wanted to keep her daughter safe. But the realms fell apart faster than I could act." A memory rose of that moment after Brienne defeated the Hound, urging Arya to come with her. Arya had refused. At the time, all she could think was that every adult who had claimed to protect her had ended up betraying her family or leading her astray. And in this alternate course of events, she had turned back to the Hound, healing him and forging a strange partnership. In the real timeline, she might have fled on her own or gone with Brienne, but not here. Here, everything had changed. Brienne glanced again at Sandor. "You survived," she said to him, not quite a question, more a statement thick with subtext. "Though you nearly died that day." He barked a humorless laugh. "Nearly. Unfortunately for both of us, I pulled through." Arya caught the faint tension in the air, remembered how the Hound had once reviled knights like Brienne, how they fought in a brutal duel that left him battered and near death. Yet she also recalled how Brienne was truly one of the few honorable knights left, always striving to keep her word. Maybe she had come hoping to see if Arya still needed protection. But Arya's path had become far darker. "I'm here in King's Landing at the Queen's request," Brienne continued. "I was part of the effort to reorganize the city's defenses to help establish new lines of security. The Queen knows my loyalty to the Starks, to the idea of a realm that is just. I suppose I wanted to see for myself if you truly stand accused of murder or if there's more to it." Arya lifted her chin. "There's more. Galen's the real murderer, he just used our blades. Now we're forced to speak the truth to the Queen and hope she doesn't decide to punish us for carrying out the killings. You can call me a hypocrite. Maybe I am. But you can also call me tired of the lies." Brienne's features softened and she looked genuinely concerned. "If Daenerys rules justly, you might find a path toward redemption. Your father once said that acknowledging one's wrongdoing is the first step to setting things right." A surge of emotion struck Arya. Eddard Stark's memory loomed large, his sense of honor and fairness. She knew that the man she remembered would have cringed at many of the choices she'd made. Yet she also believed that in the chaos that had followed his death, she'd had little choice if she wanted to survive. "Redemption," she echoed quietly, tasting the word like it was alien on her tongue. Brienne seemed to sense the depth of Arya's turmoil. She took a step forward, but the guard behind her stiffened. Arya shook her head. It's all right, she murmured, though it wasn't precisely. She didn't fear Brienne. She feared the tide of memory. Thank you for coming. But unless you can prove that Galen manipulated me and the Hound, I don't see what good your presence can do. I'll speak to the Queen on your behalf, Brienne said. At least to let her know you come from an honorable family, that your father would have wanted you to have a chance to atone. It might sway her. The Hound snorted from his corner. Targaryens are notoriously easy to sway, I hear. Especially with talk of honor. Brienne's eyes flashed. She is a queen who freed slaves in Essos. She ended tyrants' reigns. I think she has some notion of what is right. Sandor's lip curled and Arya intervened before a clash of words could escalate. If you can help, I won't stop you. But be careful, Brienne. Galen's dangerous and he'll have the city's cutthroats on his side. We discovered that the rumors of him hiring other assassins weren't just talk. Brienne nodded. Then watch your back. I've learned that justice often needs a sharp edge at its side to be enforced in King's Landing. I'll do what I can to keep that edge from cutting you. With that, she departed, the guards following her out of the courtyard. Arya exhaled, feeling the swirl of complicated emotions that Brienne's presence stirred in her. A part of her felt a faint spark of gratitude, but another part feared that too much hope would only lead to heartbreak. In the days that followed, as the trial drew nearer, the tension in the Red Keep rose to a fever pitch. Word spread among the servants and lesser lords that Galen Pyquod had been accused, that two fearsome figures, one a scarred giant, the other a northern girl rumored to have faceless men training, would testify against him. Some whispered that Galen planned to bribe the Watch to let him slip away from the city in the dead of night. Others whispered that he was rallying support from a hidden fraction of the old Lannister loyalists, or from opportunistic sellswords who'd arrived from the disputed lands. A name surfaced now and again. Rafe Rookwood, a mercenary captain said to have served Tywin Lannister decades prior. Rumor held that Rafe had drifted across the seas, fighting in the Free Cities. Now he was back, possibly in Galen's employ. Arya felt the invisible cords tighten around her and Sandor. Even though they were confined, she could sense the swirl of danger in the city. She asked the guards if there had been any incidents, but they knew little or would say little. She tried to glean scraps from servants who delivered meals, but they were careful, eyes darting around, uninterested in the troubles of their queen's pet assassins. On the eve of the trial, Daenerys summoned them for a brief private audience with only Missandei and a few Unsullied present. The queen looked tired, though her posture was impeccable and her hair was arranged in braids reminiscent of the old Targaryen tradition. She stood near a tall window in a dim audience chamber, gazing down at the city. Torchlight turned the bay into a black mirror beyond the walls. She turned when Arya and Sandor approached. The Unsullied guard stepped aside. I want to ensure we understand each other, Daenerys said softly, arms folded. Tomorrow you will speak in a formal court proceeding. The lords and ladies of King's Landing, along with my council, will hear your testimony. Galen will have his say. You must be prepared to face any accusations he hurls at you. Arya nodded. We've nothing to hide. Daenerys studied her face. Perhaps. But your past is not one that fosters trust easily. You claim to have trained with the Faceless Men. If Galen presses that angle, the crowd may believe you a cold-blooded killer who accepted coin without question. They'll question your motives for coming forward now. You will need more than your word to sway them. The Hound shifted his weight. We don't need the crowd to believe us. We need you to believe us. That drew a small, thin smile from Daenerys. I am judge, yes. But I also know how fragile the city's peace can be. If the people believe the crown condones your brand of murder, unrest will fester. All of us walk on a knife's edge. Missandei, standing by her side, interjected gently. We have compiled the statements of servants and a handful of lesser knights who observed Lord Pyquod's dealings. They back your claim that he paid bribes to certain men to remove political threats. There is enough to convict him if the court believes them. But you must corroborate these details. Arya felt a surge of relief. So there are people willing to speak. Daenerys lifted her chin. Yes. They have been promised protection. Whether the promise can shield them from all harm is uncertain, but they are willing to risk it. If Galen threatens them or tries to harm them, I will make an example of him. She looked down at her hands, then back at Arya. I once wanted to break the wheel of tyranny in these lands. Yet here I stand in the heart of King's Landing, sifting through conspiracies and murders. Sometimes I wonder if the wheel can ever be broken. She paused. But that does not mean I will not try. If Galen is guilty, I will punish him. But know this, you too must face punishment for the lives you have taken at his behest. I cannot let you walk free with no consequence. Arya accepted the words like a blow she had already braced herself for. Daenerys was no naive queen. She was a conqueror who had seen war firsthand. Mercy was not her strongest attribute, though she could show it when she chose. "We understand," Arya said quietly. "If you must punish us, so be it. Just let the truth come out first." Daenerys inclined her head. "Speak honestly in the court tomorrow. If you do so, I will judge you fairly. That is all I can promise." They were dismissed and returned to their chambers. The Hound paced in tight circles, occasionally stopping to stretch his arm or roll his shoulders. "I don't like it," he grumbled. "No telling what Galen might have planned. He might have bought half the city watch for all we know." Arya stared at her reflection in a small polished steel mirror, studying the lines of her face. She looked older than she felt, or perhaps younger. A swirl of conflicting impressions. She touched the thin scar on her temple, a relic of a fight on the road. "We have to trust that Daenerys won't let him bribe his way out of this." Sandor scoffed. "Trust a queen? That's like trusting a viper not to bite. But for now, we have no choice." That night, Arya barely slept, drifting in and out of uneasy dreams. Morning broke in a wash of pale light, and they were summoned at once. The time for the trial had come. The great hall was bustling with men and women of all ranks, from minor lords in threadbare finery to merchants who had somehow gained admittance. Guards in Targaryen livery lined the walls, unsullied among them. The queen herself was seated on an elevated seat near the foot of the Iron Throne. Behind her, 2 knights stood vigilant. Off to one side, Missandei and another advisor waited with writing implements to record the proceedings. The atmosphere sizzled with tension. Word of this trial had spread quickly, and those who sought gossip or advantage had flocked here. Arya entered with Sandor, escorted by 4 guards. She felt 1,000 stares burning into her. Whispers rose like startled birds, swirling around her name. She caught fragments. "Stark girl? I thought she was dead. The Hound, he was that monstrous dog of the Lannisters, faceless? Gods help us." The hush sharpened when Galen arrived, flanked by 2 watch captains who did not quite meet his eyes. He had chosen a fine burgundy cloak with gold pins and rings adorning his fingers, as if to present himself as every inch the lord. Yet Arya saw the lines of strain at his temples, the faint sweat on his brow. He was cornered, and he knew it. Daenerys raised her hand, commanding silence. The hall quieted. "We gather to hear the case against Lord Galen Pikewood, who stands accused of orchestrating unsanctioned killings, bribery, and conspiracy to undermine the Queen's peace. We also hear the confessions of Sandor Clegane and Arya Stark, who participated in these killings. The goal is to discover truth and deliver justice." She gestured to Galen. "You shall speak first, my lord. Present your defense." Galen stepped forward, clearing his throat. His voice carried the calculated resonance of a skilled courtier. "Your grace, good lords, and all assembled. I am a loyal servant of Queen Daenerys, committed to protecting King's Landing from the manifold threats that loom against her reign. The men and women who died by my order were those who conspired to fund or instigate rebellion. Had I pursued open accusations, it would have caused panic and chaos in the streets. I sought to handle it quietly for the greater good of the realm." He cast a disparaging look at Arya and the Hound. "These 2 were indeed hired by me, but only after they approached me offering their blades. I did pay them to eliminate threats. Yet it is they who turned upon me when I refused to pay more than the agreed sum. They threatened me, demanded a higher price for their continued silence. When I would not give it, they concocted the story that I was merely eliminating rivals. In truth, I can produce a list of treasonous gatherings each of these so-called rivals attended. Had I not acted, the Queen might well face another uprising." Some in the crowd murmured. A few nodded warily, as though uncertain of which side to believe. Galen produced a scroll from within his cloak, passing it to a Targaryen guard, who then delivered it to Missandei. "This is a record of suspicious gatherings, cross-referenced with the Crown's own intelligence," Galen went on. "As you will see, most of them met in secret at odd hours, discussed seditious topics." Daenerys tilted her head, waiting as Missandei skimmed the document. "My sources," Missandei said carefully, "have not confirmed these particular gatherings." "Where did you obtain your information, Lord Pikewood?" Galen gave a thin smile. "I have my own network. Sadly, some of them cannot appear to testify, as they died in the line of service." The crowd buzzed with suspicion. The Queen nodded. "Very well. We shall examine these names more closely. In the meantime, Sandor Clegane, Arya Stark, you may speak." The Hound opened his mouth, but Arya stepped forward first. She looked at the faces arrayed in the hall, men who had once served the Lannisters, knights who might remember her father, even some small folk who might recall the madness of Joffrey's reign. She swallowed and lifted her voice as best she could. "I am Arya Stark of Winterfell," she said. A ripple of recognition passed through the throng, some gasping that a Stark girl was still alive. "I'm no lady. I've killed men, yes, including the ones Galen named. But I did so believing they were traitors plotting an uprising. Then I discovered that Galen had no proof. They were simply opponents to him or people who threatened his hold on the city. He used us just as he used others." Sandor broke in then, voice rough. "He paid us to kill Lady Tanda Gower because she supposedly plotted treason. But after we nearly cut her down, we discovered she had letters that revealed Galen's role in multiple assassinations, letters that we destroyed at his command. Without those letters, she had no way to prove his guilt. So he stands here claiming to be the hero protecting the Queen's peace, when in truth he was just removing obstacles to his own rise in the court." Gasps and murmurs rippled. Galen's composure wavered momentarily. He forced a laugh. "Is that so? A likely story, but where's your proof?" Arya turned her gaze to Daenerys. "Witnesses will speak. Men who overheard him giving orders, servants who saw him pay coin in exchange for slitting throats. They'll confirm he used the city's fear to expand his power." At that signal, Missandei motioned to guards who escorted in two individuals. The first was a middle-aged servant with trembling hands, his face marked by worry lines. The second, a younger woman wearing the plain garb of a scullery maid. Both approached with bowed heads. Galen eyed them, color creeping into his cheeks. The servant cleared his throat. I served in Lord Pyquood's household these past months, delivering letters, messages. I overheard him and his steward discussing payments for discreet tasks. The steward said something like, 'Those sales words are expensive, my lord. Might it not be simpler to accuse them openly?' And Lord Pyquood replied that he didn't want any open accusations, that he needed to handle them quietly so no one would suspect a personal vendetta." The man's voice shook. "He threatened to cut my tongue out if I ever repeated those words." Galen attempted to protest, but the scullery maid stepped up next, twisting her apron in her hands. "My lord," she glanced fearfully at Galen, then hastened to address the queen. "I used to help in the kitchens, so I saw who came and went for private suppers. Sometimes men came late at night, wearing cloaks with hoods and left with purses jingling full of coin. One time I peeked as one man opened his purse. He pulled out a slip of parchment with a name on it, some Lord Galen wanted dead. I never saw the Lord's face, but the steward told me not to mention it if I valued my life." Anger flashed in Galen's eyes. "Lies, all of it," he shouted, the veneer of courtly grace cracking. "These people have been bribed by Tanda, or by that meddling Brienne of Tarth, or even by the Queen's other counselors who wish to see me fall. None of this is—" A clatter of steel interrupted him. Brienne herself stepped forward from the crowd, clad in her armor, flanked by two Targaryen knights. "I found a guard in Galen's service who was left for dead after a skirmish." He recovered enough to speak, claiming that Galen had ordered the elimination of any man who might talk. "The guard gave me this." She held up a tattered piece of parchment. "It's a partial ledger of bribes. It lists amounts given to men described only by initials. One entry references H and W." Hound and Wolf. Arya's heart skipped. She hadn't known such a record existed. Brienne offered it to Missandei, who scanned it swiftly with a frown. "Many sums correspond to known incidents of violence in Flea Bottom and near the city gates," Missandei said. Galen's face paled. "This is absurd. That ledger could have been forged." Daenerys' eyes narrowed. "Could it indeed? Or does it merely confirm what we have already heard? That you orchestrated a campaign of killing, paying mercenaries and assassins under codenames to hide your involvement?" A tense silence fell, broken only by a mutter from someone in the gallery. Galen's mouth worked, but no words came at first. Then he rallied, turning to face the crowd. "And what if I did? These parasites threatened the Queen's peace, threatened our city. Look around you, every day we risk an uprising or infiltration by enemies. Is it not better to cull them quietly than to plunge the realm into open conflict again?" A rumble of unease spread through the watchers. Galen continued, voice rising. "Daenerys Targaryen sits on the Iron Throne now, but do we truly believe the other great lords will accept her forever? We must be vigilant, ruthless, even to stamp out sedition before it grows. If I went too far, I did it out of loyalty. And if you punish me, you show the realm that you reward loyalty with condemnation." Arya could feel the weight of that final argument. Galen was appealing to the fear within the city. People remembered the War of the Five Kings, the chaos that erupted again and again. Daenerys' rule was not yet unchallenged. To some, men like Galen who took necessary steps to preserve order might be seen as a lesser evil. But from the way Daenerys' face darkened, Arya suspected Galen's words were not swaying her so much as infuriating her. The queen slowly rose to her feet. I did not come here to be a butcher like the tyrants before me, she said, her voice carrying. You claim loyalty, yet your methods sow fear among the people. That is not my way. If a rebellion truly arises, I will face it openly, not hide behind clandestine murders. Galen forced a bitter smile. Your Grace, you mistake my practicality for malice. But do as you wish. If you wish to see me hang, so be it. Just remember, the city sees that these two killers worked for me and they also walk free. How will you punish them if you punish me? Daenerys glanced at Arya and the Hound. They have confessed their complicity. Their fates will also be decided today. But first, you will answer for your crimes. She signaled to one of her knights to bring forth 2 more witnesses. They gave similar accounts, describing secret meetings, hush money, fear. With each testimony, Galen's composure splintered further. By the end, he was breathing raggedly, glaring at the queen with a look that mixed fury and desperation. It was clear that the tide in the hall had turned against him. At last, Daenerys called for order. The murmurs in the great hall subsided. Her gaze swept the room. In the eyes of the crown, these accounts leave little doubt that Lord Galen Pikewood abused his position, orchestrating murders for personal gain while claiming to serve the realm. Such actions cannot be tolerated. She paused, letting the import sink in. Therefore, I pronounce him guilty of conspiracy and murder. His lands and titles are forfeit to the crown. As for his life, let him stand before the city and face judgment. If there is any cause to spare him, it must be found in the next breaths of this court. Otherwise, he shall be executed at dawn tomorrow. An uproar of voices followed, some exclaiming that he deserved immediate execution, others muttering about the precedent. Galen's face contorted with rage, but 4 unsullied stepped forward, spears raised, blocking any chance of flight. He spat on the floor, an ugly curse on his lips, but did not resist. He knew he was beaten for now. The queen waited for quiet, then turned to Arya and the Hound. Their hearts pounded in unison. You have admitted your part in these killings. Yet you have also helped expose Lord Pikewood's guilt. I will not pretend that your hands are clean or that you deserve a full pardon. Her eyes flicked over them, measuring their reactions. Still, I must weigh your cooperation. Without you, Galen's crimes might never have come to light. You claim that you were deceived, at least in part. Therefore, I offer you this, an exile from King's Landing under guard to be enforced once Galen's sentence is carried out. You will leave the city. You will not return without my permission. Should you do so, your lives are forfeit. Arya felt a rush of relief and confusion. She had braced herself for imprisonment, possibly worse. Exile was almost a kindness, though it also meant severing ties to the swirling power struggles she had become entangled in. She bowed her head, struggling to find words. The Hound let out a low grunt, the tension in his shoulders easing a fraction. We'll take it, he said bluntly. Daenerys nodded. You will remain in custody for the day. At dawn, you will witness the execution of Galen Pikewood. You will see what fate awaits those who murder in my realm for personal gain. Then you will gather your belongings and an escort of my guard will see you beyond the city walls. Is that understood? Arya and Sandor both murmured assent. The queen gestured for the guards to lead them away. As they turned, Arya caught a final glimpse of Galen, face twisted with hatred, being taken in the opposite direction. It struck her that all of this, the murders, the secrecy, the entire twisted saga, might end with a single swing of the headsman's sword. She felt no pity, only a dull ache. For in exposing Galen, she and the Hound had also exposed themselves, losing any chance to remain in King's Landing. Perhaps that was for the best, but it also left her uncertain. Where would she go? They were placed back in their chambers, though the door was left open to allow them some measure of comfort. 2 guards lingered outside as usual, but they no longer eyed Arya and Sandor as imminent threats. That afternoon, Brienne of Tarth stopped by again, offering a small nod of approval. You spoke well, she told Arya. You told the truth. And you'll live, though you must leave the city. Arya's lips curved in a slight, wry smile. Leaving King's Landing might be a blessing. I never felt at home here. She paused. Will you remain in service to the queen? Brienne nodded. For a time, yes. She wants peace. She might achieve it if she can quell all these petty conspiracies. But she'll need strong arms and honest hearts around her. I gave her my sword because I believe she can do right by the realm. The Hound scoffed from the side. Honest hearts. He almost spat. Good luck finding many of those in the Red Keep. Brienne regarded him coolly. Not everyone is as cynical as you, Clegane. Or is lost. He bared his teeth in a mockery of a smile. Lost or found, I'm done here. He paused, expression turning serious for once. You nearly killed me once. Now you stand here, offering courtesy. Why? Brienne leveled him a direct look. Because Arya chose to spare you. We're all different people than we were then. If she forgave you enough to travel with you, who am I to cling to old grudges? Sandor grunted, not quite sure what to say. He turned away, arms folded, to stare at the narrow window. Arya watched the interplay in silence, remembering that savage fight in the mountains and how everything after had shaped her life in ways she never expected. Brienne took her leave and they were alone again. That night passed in restless quiet. In the dimness, Arya stared at the ceiling, thinking of the dawn to come. She recalled how she had once witnessed her father's beheading, a memory that had haunted her every waking hour of her youth. Now, she would witness another man's death, a man whose crimes had entangled her life in blood. The wheel of violence turned, day after day, no matter how many people tried to break it. When morning came, they were summoned to the courtyard of the Red Keep. The sun was bright and cold, and a scaffold had been erected near the walls. A crowd of onlookers had already gathered. Galen stood on the platform, hands bound, flanked by two unsullied. His burgundy cloak was gone, replaced by a simple tunic that bore no lordly insignia. A headsman in black stood by with a long-handled sword. Daenerys and a small retinue watched from a vantage point to the side. Arya noted that Missandei was nearby, along with Brienne and other knights. The Hound stood beside Arya, arms crossed. A hush fell. Galen's face was pale, but he held his chin high. Daenerys' voice rang out. "Lord Galen Pyquood, you have been found guilty of murder, conspiracy, and treason against the peace of the realm. Your titles are stripped. Your lands forfeit. Your life is the price you pay." Galen's eyes scanned the crowd, as if searching for some last ally. None emerged. He spat one final oath at the queen. "Burn in the seven hells," he snarled. "You think you're different from the others, but you're the same. This city will devour you as it devoured every king before." Then he turned a hateful gaze upon Arya and Sandor. "I'll see you both in the darkness." The headsman didn't wait for more. The sword flashed in the crisp morning light. The blow was quick and clean. Galen's head toppled forward, landing with a dull thud on the scaffold. A collective exhalation seemed to stir the air. Blood pooled, bright on the worn wood. Arya closed her eyes for half a heartbeat, letting the finality wash over her. She had been complicit in the man's atrocities, but at least now it was done. She breathed out slowly. There would be no more messages from Galen, no more clandestine hits at his behest. That chapter of her life was sealed in blood. Daenerys watched impassively, then gestured for her guards to take the body away. Her gaze flicked to Arya and the Hound. "Take them to gather their belongings," she said. "Escort them from the city as ordered. They are exiled." The crowd parted, some with curiosity, others with looks of fear or pity. Arya felt the Targaryen soldiers close around her in a respectful but firm cordon. She took one last look at the Red Keep's towers. She remembered days of scurrying through hidden passages, nights of vantage points on parapets. The city still stank of rot, but a strange pang stirred in her chest. This place had shaped her in ways she couldn't yet understand. Sandor placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her forward. "Come on, girl. Let's take the coin we have left and get out of this pit." They were taken back to their chambers to retrieve the few possessions they owned. Arya buckled Needle at her hip, making sure it was secure. She still had the battered cloak that had accompanied her through so many roads. The Hound slung on his sword belt and an old pack carrying what little else they possessed. A handful of gold coins clinked in a pouch, some from Galen's pay, some they had saved. It wasn't much, but enough to keep them fed for a time. Their escort led them through the castle's corridors, out into the courtyard, and across the drawbridge to the Gate of the Gods. Along the way, they passed knots of onlookers. Some whispered, "That's the Stark girl," while others eyed the Hound with fear. The final set of gates opened, revealing the city beyond. The main thoroughfare bustled with morning activity, carts rolling over cobblestones, peddlers hawking wares. Soldiers in Targaryen colors cleared a path. Arya and Sandor moved at a measured pace, absorbing the swirl of chaos. Now and then, Arya glimpsed the more wretched corners of King's Landing, alleyways where starving children waited with hollow eyes, scrawny dogs sniffing at refuse, drunks hunched against crumbling walls. She remembered how she'd once been among those lost souls, a child scuttling about, trying to survive. But she felt no nostalgia, only an odd, somber reflection that she was leaving the city in better shape than when she had arrived, if only by a fraction. Soon, they reached the towering gates of the city walls. The Targaryen guards halted, nodding stiffly. "We are ordered to escort you beyond the perimeter, then you go on your way. If you return without the Queen's leave, we will arrest you." Sandor shrugged. "You needn't tell us twice. There's nothing left for us in this cesspit." Arya breathed in the last stench of the city as the gates creaked open. The road beyond stretched to the horizon, lined with the detritus of those who had come fleeing war or famine, hoping for safety within the capital's walls. Tattered tents and makeshift shelters clung to the roadsides. The distant farmland, scarred by battles, lay in a patchwork of half-tilled fields and weed-choked ditches. The guards accompanied them for a short distance along the King's Road, ensuring they had truly departed the city. Then they halted, turning back. The captain of the guard gave Arya a steady look. "I wish you luck, Arya Stark. Don't waste the freedom the Queen has granted." She nodded wordlessly, and the guards returned to the gates. Arya stood there, adjusting the strap of her pack, glancing over her shoulder at the silhouette of King's Landing in the distance. The morning sun was climbing higher, bathing the city's walls in pale gold. She wondered what new intrigues would arise in her absence, wondered if Daenerys would truly succeed in forging a better rule or if the city would devour her, as Galen had predicted. Only time would tell. Sandor started walking north along the road, leaving her standing for a moment. She took one last breath, then hurried to catch up. They walked side by side, the traffic on the road gradually thinning as they moved away from the capital. Each step felt strangely unmoored, as though they were wandering from one life into the unknown next. After a while, the Hound broke the silence. "So, where to now? We've coin enough to head anywhere. West, east, north?" Arya glanced at him. "I know where I'd go if I could," she said slowly. "Winterfell." He gave a soft snort. You go running back to your pack?" She stared down at the dusty road. "I don't know if I have a pack left. Jon's in the north, some say. Sansa might be in the Eyrie or with Daenerys's court, I'm not sure. But Winterfell still stands if the rumors are true. Maybe we could find some measure of belonging there, or at least closure." Sandor let out a breath. "And if you go, what then? You expect them to welcome me with open arms? I'm the Hound, remember? The one who served Joffrey, who terrorized small folk." A memory flickered in Arya's mind of the time she'd hated him, vowed to kill him. How far they had come. "They'll welcome me," she said, though the words felt uncertain. "And if I vouch for you, perhaps they'll let you be. You're not the same man you were when you served Joffrey." He barked a bitter laugh. "Maybe not. But people don't forget scars on the face or on the soul." They continued in silence, each lost in thought. The day wore on, the winter sun never quite warming the wind that blew across the road. Around midday, they stopped near a small copse of trees to rest their legs and eat stale bread from Arya's pack. A few travelers passed on horseback, giving them a wide berth. Perhaps they recognized the Hound's looming form or Arya's intense stare. Most simply hurried on, as travelers often do when war-scarred roads are filled with danger. "We could take on honest guard work," Arya mused, "or hunt bandits to earn coin along the way. We don't have to be assassins anymore." She tasted the words. Once she had made killing a purpose, a means to feed her vengeance. Now that purpose felt hollow. She wanted more. "I don't want to be a sword for hire anymore." Sandor swallowed a mouthful of bread, grimacing at its dryness. "Never much liked it myself. But it was what I was good at." He wiped crumbs from his beard. "You taught me something, you know? The night you didn't leave me to die. I saw that even someone who hates me could find a scrap of mercy left in her. You and we might not find a place in a cozy hall, but maybe we can try living without being the Queen's dogs or some lord's leash holders." She considered that. If the North truly is under Jon's banner, maybe we can find a piece of land where we're left alone. Or I could serve him if he's formed his own council. But I'm not certain that's what I want either. Her heart twinged with old loyalties. She remembered the love she felt for Jon, the brother who taught her kindness in a world that offered little. Maybe seeing him again would mend parts of her she thought were forever broken. They resumed walking. The farmland turned to rolling hills. Birds wheeled overhead, cawing in the cold sky. The quiet after the noise of King's Landing was jarring, as though they'd stepped into another realm. At times, travelers approached, some asking if they knew the roads, others begging for coin. Sandor chased off a ragged band of youths who tried to corner them, presumably thinking the pair would be easy marks. A single glare from the Hound sent them scattering. By dusk, they'd reached a crossroads where a small inn stood, smoke curling from its chimney. The sign above the door was faded, but Arya could just make out the shape of a donkey. The aroma of stewed meat drifted on the wind. They exchanged a glance. Food and a real bed were tempting. The days of living rough had taught them to snatch small comforts when they could. Inside, the common room was dim, lit by a few guttering candles and a central hearth. A scattering of patrons crowded around rough-hewn tables, sipping ale or gnawing on stew. The innkeeper, a stout woman with hair tied in a kerchief, eyed them but gave no sign of recognition. Arya was grateful that the swirl of rumors from King's Landing hadn't yet reached this backwater. They took a table near the wall. Sandor slapped a few coins on the scarred wood and demanded stew and ale. Arya asked only for water, her stomach churning from the tension of the day. They ate in subdued silence. Arya found herself glancing around at the other travelers. A peddler with a donkey outside, a pair of farmers discussing the weather's effect on their fields, a half-asleep old man in the corner. No one spared them more than a passing glance. For once, they were just two wanderers on the dusty roads of Westeros. Halfway through the meal, a man entered, tall and gaunt, carrying a lute slung over his shoulder. His cloak was patched in many places and his boots were worn. A wandering singer by the look of him. He greeted the innkeeper with a tired smile, ordering a cup of cider. Then he turned to the room, cleared his throat, and said, "Good folk, with your permission, I'll sing a ballad for a coin or two. Or a story to chase away the gloom." No one objected. A few seemed interested in some distraction. The singer took a seat near the hearth, tuning his lute. He plucked a few notes, then launched into a ballad about a brave knight who fought for a doomed princess long ago. His voice was not especially strong, but it was steady and heartfelt. Arya listened, letting the melody wash over her, thinking of how songs might fill the silence after so much death. She recalled the nights in Winterfell's hall when minstrels would sing of heroes and ladies fair, all illusions that never quite prepared her for reality. But now, after everything, it felt almost comforting to hear a tune. She found her eyelids growing heavy, lulled by the warmth of the fire and the tiredness that clung to her bones. When the singer finished, a smattering of claps followed. A farmer tossed him a copper, which he caught with a bow. The singer's eyes flitted around the room, resting on Arya and Sandor with mild curiosity. Then, as if reading the mood, he began a quieter tune, plucking a plaintive melody that spoke of lost roads and distant loves. Arya closed her eyes for a moment, letting the gloom recede. Eventually, she looked at Sandor. He was half listening, half brooding, arms folded over his chest. "You'd make a poor minstrel," she murmured, teasing him lightly. He grunted. "I'd break that lute over someone's head. That's the extent of my music." A faint smile tugged at her lips. They finished their stew, parted with a few more coins for a pair of rooms. The innkeeper led Arya to a small chamber at the end of a narrow hallway. It contained a single bed, lumpy but better than sleeping on the road. She set her pack down, closed the door, and collapsed onto the mattress. Exhaustion pulled at her. She thought of Galen's severed head, the clang of the headsman's blade, Daenerys' stern voice pronouncing judgment. Now it was over, but another journey began. She drifted into a heavy sleep, dreamless for once. Morning dawned gray and damp, with a drizzle pattering the thatched roof. Arya woke stiff and restless, used to rising early on the road. Sandor was already awake when she ventured into the common room, chewing on a piece of stale bread. "A bit of rain," he remarked. "Might make the roads muddy." She shrugged. "We've marched through worse." They paid the innkeeper, gathered their things, and stepped outside into a fine mist. Their breath puffed before them in the chilly air. The donkey brayed in the yard, but its owner was nowhere to be seen. The singer from the previous night was packing his lute in a worn leather case, preparing for the day's journey. He gave them a polite nod, then headed off down the road, humming softly. Arya and Sandor turned their own steps northward. They traveled for hours in near silence, the rain turning to a light drizzle that soaked their cloaks. The countryside rolled past. Small villages, patches of forest, meandering streams. At one point, a ragged child raced out from behind a fence to beg for alms, eyes wide with hunger. Arya tossed him a copper coin, remembering the times she'd scraped by on the kindness of strangers. The child muttered thanks and fled, as though fearful of what the tall man with the scarred face might do. Around midday, they reached another fork in the road. A faded sign pointed left to the Riverlands, right to a region that had once belonged to House Lannister. Arya paused, reading the weathered words. She thought of the Riverlands, seat of House Tully, the place where her mother had come from. That land had been ravaged by the war, left in pieces by the Freys. She also thought of the Eyrie, where Sansa might once have been. Perhaps her sister had left for King's Landing or somewhere else by now. The world had turned so many times that nothing was certain. Sandor glanced at her. You have a preference? If we head left, we might aim for Riverrun. Some say the Tullus retook it, though that's old rumor. Arya rubbed her brow. Riverrun's close to the twins. I'd rather not pass near that cursed place. Right then? Toward the west? Or do we cut across country? Try to skirt the lines of old conflicts? Before she could answer, they heard a shout from behind. They turned to see two men jogging up the road, one armed with a sword at his belt, the other carrying a short spear. They wore patchwork armor, mismatched pieces of boiled leather and mail. Their expressions were guarded, but they didn't immediately appear hostile. "Hoy!" the swordsman called. "You folks heading north? We heard talk that the roads might be dangerous near the old battlefield. Bandits have been harrying travelers." He eyed Sandor's tall form. "You look like you can handle yourself, friend. Could we possibly accompany you as far as the next town?" Arya narrowed her eyes, feeling a prickle of suspicion. She scanned them for signs of deception. Their gear was well worn, though not as battered as a common bandit's might be. But that didn't mean they weren't trouble. She offered a tight smile. "We prefer to travel alone." The man with the spear shrugged. "Suit yourself. Just thought we'd ask." His gaze flicked to the slender sword at Arya's hip, the one she carried with a certain intangible confidence. "Be careful, then. The roads get worse a few leagues on." They walked on, the two men giving them a wide berth before drifting off ahead along the left-hand fork. Sandor scratched at his chin. "Bandits, or maybe not. You never know." Arya nodded. "We've seen worse." She paused, studying the path. "If we keep going north by the main roads, we'll be more likely to run into travelers and trouble. Maybe we should cut across, keep off the main routes, see if we can avoid big towns." "We're not exactly trying to draw attention." Sandor grunted. "Fair enough. I don't care which path we take, so long as it leads us away from the south." He turned, eyeing the faint trail that branched through a copse of trees. "Might be muddy, but if it heads in a generally northern direction, I'm all for it." They veered onto the lesser-used route, stepping around puddles. The drizzle intensified, soaking their boots. The branches overhead formed a canopy that dripped cold water down their necks. But the path was relatively empty, and Arya found she welcomed the solitude. Each step away from King's Landing felt like shedding a layer of old skin, though the memories clung. They walked until dusk, finally emerging from the woods near a low ridge. A slope led up to a half-collapsed watchtower. Once, it might have been manned by local lords' men, but now it looked abandoned. A single crow perched on the broken parapet, cawing into the fading light. Arya examined the ground around the tower, seeing no fresh tracks. "Might be a place to shelter for the night," she said. Sandor nodded. "Beats sleeping in the open rain." They trudged up the slope, picking their way around loose stones. The tower's entrance was half-choked by debris, but they managed to squeeze inside. The interior was dark and musty, the air thick with the smell of moss and rot. Water dripped from cracks in the ceiling. Yet there was enough space to spread out a pair of cloaks and build a small fire if they could find kindling. Arya located some dry twigs in a corner and used flint to spark a tiny flame. They coaxed it into a flickering campfire, its light dancing on the stone walls. Sandor cleared away rubble to make room for them to sit. He rummaged through his pack, producing what remained of their food, a bit of hard cheese, some jerky, a few stale biscuits. They shared a meal in silence. Outside, the wind moaned and rain spattered against the old stones. At length, Arya broke the quiet. "We could reach the Riverlands in a week if we keep this pace. From there, we might follow the Trident north, eventually crossing the neck into the north." Sandor grimaced. "Aye, the neck. Full of bogs and insects. Grand. But if that's where you want to go, I'll follow you, at least until we figure out what next." She studied him in the firelight. "What do you want, really?" Her voice was soft, almost lost beneath the wind. "You keep saying you've no place. Do you still dream of living out your days with a cask of wine, ignoring the rest of the world?" He let out a small, humorless chuckle. "Some days, yes. I've been a dog on a leash so long, I'm not sure how to live otherwise. But I don't fancy crawling into a hole and dying alone." He tossed a pebble into the fire, watching the sparks flare. "You're the only one who's ever halfway understood me, girl. That's as close to companionship as I've got." A pang of empathy twisted in Arya's chest. She remembered how many times she'd told herself she hated him, how she'd kept him on her kill list. Yet that hate had gradually warped into something else on the long roads they traveled. They were each other's anchor in a bleak and uncaring land. You protected me when it mattered, she said finally, her voice low. I know you said it was for ransom money at first, but I think you also needed someone to protect so you'd remember you weren't just a monster. He blinked at that, face hidden in half-shadow. Huh, maybe. He let the silence stretch a moment. What about you? Still hungry for vengeance? She considered. My kill list is shorter now. Most of the names are gone, one way or another. I'm tired. Tired of chasing ghosts. Tired of letting hatred define me. He nodded slowly. You said once you had a family. If there's any left, maybe you can find them. Let that define you instead. She shifted closer to the fire. That's what I'm hoping. If John's in the north, maybe I'll find him. But I can't say what I'll do after that. Stay? Go? I don't even know if he'd recognize me anymore. A gust of wind rattled the tower and a trickle of water ran down one wall. They lapsed into silence, each pondering the uncertain roads ahead. After a time, Arya stretched out on her bedroll, the firelight warming her feet. She gazed at the flickering flames, letting her mind wander. Slowly, sleep crept in. In the middle of the night, she started awake at a sound outside, hoofbeats on wet ground, perhaps. She tensed, listening for voices, for any sign of intruders. The wind howled and the rain hammered down. After a moment, she heard only the persistent hush of the storm. Probably just a stray horse or a traveler passing in the night, oblivious to the half-ruined tower. The Hound slept with one hand on his sword hilt, so if danger came, they'd be ready. Dawn arrived shrouded in mist, the rain reduced to a cold drizzle. They roused themselves, ate a sparse breakfast, and set off again. The day blurred into a sodden trek across muddy trails, fording a couple of swollen streams. By late afternoon, the rain slackened. Clouds drifted apart to reveal a slice of watery sunlight. As they rounded a bend near a grove of willow trees, Sandor paused, lifting a hand in warning. Arya froze, scanning the area. She caught sight of movement beyond the willows, men crouched in the tall grass. Possibly an ambush. Her heart kicked. Without a word, they crept closer, keeping low. Indeed, a group of 4 men with crossbows waited, half-concealed. A cart drawn by an ox approached from the opposite direction on the track, its driver unsuspecting. They're about to rob that cart, Arya whispered. Sandor nodded. She felt a flare of anger. Once she might have skirted around, letting the bandits do as they would. But something in her rebelled at the notion of standing by while an innocent traveler was set upon. She placed a hand on Needle's hilt. We can't just watch them slaughter the driver. The Hound grunted softly. Didn't say we should. You want to intervene, let's do it quick. They moved swiftly, hugging the line of willows. The bandits were so focused on the cart, they failed to notice Arya and Sandor approaching from the flank. One man rose, crossbow aimed at the driver. Halt, he barked. Throw down any coin you've got, or we'll take it off your corpse. The driver yelled in alarm, fumbling the reins. The ox snorted, stamping in fear. 3 more crossbows were lifted, pointed at the hapless driver. Then Arya sprang from behind, slashing at the first bandit's arm before he could loose his bolt. He cried out, crossbow firing a wild shot that sailed harmlessly into the trees. Another bandit whirled, but the Hound's sword was already cleaving down, knocking the man's weapon aside. Chaos erupted. 2 crossbowmen tried to reload, fumbling with bolts, but they stood no chance against the immediate, brutal onslaught. Arya sidestepped a panicked swing from a bandit who dropped his crossbow and drew a dagger. She slashed low with needle, cutting deep into his thigh. He collapsed, howling. The Hound took down another with a crushing blow to the head, sending the man sprawling in the mud. The remaining bandit, eyes wide, turned to flee, only to find Arya stepping into his path. Her blade flicked up and he froze, hands raised. The driver gaped, uncertain whether to flee or stay. Sandor kicked away the crossbows from the groaning men. One seemed unconscious, the other was whimpering as blood oozed from a head wound. Bloody idiots, the Hound growled, turning to the final bandit. You going to stand and fight or piss yourself? The bandit dropped his dagger. Mercy, he gasped. We just needed coin, times are hard. Arya regarded him coldly. Hard times or not, you were about to murder an innocent driver. She pressed Needle's tip to his throat. You want to live? You never ambush travelers again. He nodded frantically. Never again. We'll go somewhere else, I swear. Sandor looked ready to skewer him anyway. Arya hesitated, a memory tugging at her of all the men she'd slain without hesitation. But something had changed in her. She lowered her sword an inch. Go, then, she said, voice tight. Take your wounded friends and crawl away. The bandit didn't wait for a second invitation. He scrambled to help the groaning men. They dragged themselves off the road, cursing. One spat blood at Arya's feet, but none dared raise a weapon again. The driver exhaled shakily, guiding his ox to the side. He stared at Arya and the Hound as though they were avenging spirits. Thank you, he stammered. I've got nothing to give in return, only a bit of salted fish. But if you want it, eh? Arya shook her head. Keep it. Just be careful. These roads aren't safe. He nodded gratefully, urging his ox forward. The cart trundled away. Arya watched it go, a strange emptiness in her chest. She'd saved someone, killed or wounded a few outlaws, but also spared one who might well become a bandit again somewhere else. She felt the moral weight of it all, a complexity that no one had taught her how to handle. Sandor slapped her shoulder lightly. You could have ended them. Why the mercy? His tone was curious, not accusing. She'd needle. I've taken enough lives that I didn't need to. I'm trying something different. She glanced away. If it comes back to bite me, so be it. A slow nod from the Hound. He seemed oddly thoughtful. Then he cleared his throat. Come on. Sun's dipping. We should push on until we find a better spot to camp. They walked, leaving the battered outlaws behind. After a while, they forded another shallow stream, the water stinging their legs with cold. When they emerged on the opposite bank, they saw a sign that indicated the Riverlands lay only a few days north. Arya thought of the blackened shell of Harrenhal, of the endless atrocities she'd witnessed in those lands during the war. She felt a tug of dread, but also a sense that passing through old memories might be the only way to truly move forward. They set up camp beneath an oak, the ground damp but workable. Arya gathered branches for a small fire. Sandor scoured the area for hazards. By the time darkness fell, they were huddled around flames again, the wood popping and hissing with residual moisture. Rain clouds had receded, leaving a cold, star-speckled sky overhead. The silhouettes of branches swayed in the breeze. Arya fiddled with her boots, draining water from them. She missed the relative dryness of the Red Keep's corridors, but not the suffocating sense of danger that coiled in every shadow. Out here, at least, danger was honest robbers, wolves, storms. No webs of political deceit to snare her. As she set her boots by the fire to dry, she noticed Sandor regarding her quietly. What? She asked, unsettled by his scrutiny. He shrugged. Just thinking how, a year ago, you might have stabbed the bandit in the throat without blinking. You've changed. She turned her gaze to the dancing flames. Maybe I have. I've been so full of rage for so long, losing my father, the Red Wedding, everything. But after seeing what vengeance did to men like Galen, I'm tired of it. I want something else. He grunted. Still that wolf in you, though. I see it in your eyes. A faint smile ghosted her lips. Wolves protect their own. Maybe that's all I want to do now, protect what's left of my family or help others who need it. Killing for profit or to feed old grudges, it's empty. They listened to the crackle of the fire. In the distance, an owl hooted. After a time, Sandor lay back, using his pack as a pillow. Arya kept watch for a while, scanning the trees. The night deepened, the air growing sharper with cold. Eventually, she too lay down, wrapping her cloak tightly. Her mind flickered through images of the day's events. The ambush, the trial, Galen's final curse. But also the uncertain promise of a new direction. When morning arrived, they continued north. The next few days were marked by muddy roads, intermittent showers, and the occasional farmstead that offered fresh bread or a bed of straw in exchange for a few coppers. Little by little, they drew closer to the Riverlands. Signs of the old war were evident. Charred ruins of barns, scorched fields that had not yet been replanted. But also glimmers of recovery, new homes under construction, small folk working the land with grim determination. At a small crossroads village, they overheard talk about the lords of the region. House Tully was said to be re-establishing control over Riverrun, though the details were murky. Some said Edmure Tully had brokered peace with the crown, others said Bronn of the Blackwater had some dealings in the area. Rumors multiplied freely, as they always did in war-torn lands. Arya and Sandor avoided large towns, preferring small hamlets or solitary campsites. Word of Daenerys Targaryen's rule trickled north, spurring endless speculation about whether she would visit the Riverlands or remain in King's Landing. No one recognized Arya or the Hound, or if they did, they kept silent. At least no one tried to arrest them. One evening, they reached a lonely stretch of road flanked by thick forest. The path meandered along a low ridge, descending into a misty valley. The sun had dropped behind the tree line, painting the sky in murky blues and grays. Sandor wanted to press on a bit farther, hoping to find a dry clearing, so they continued until the forest canopy opened onto a small ravine with a narrow stream trickling through. Arya moved to step across a cluster of stones, but paused. Fresh footprints in the mud. More than one set likely made that day. She crouched, brushing her fingers over them. Sandor came up behind her. Travelers? Could be, Arya said, narrowing her eyes. But it looks like several men, maybe more. They went downstream. He studied the tracks, armed from the depth of the heel. Could be mercenaries or soldiers. Let's be cautious. They followed the footprints a short distance, curiosity piqued. Soon, voices reached their ears, low, gruff, echoing among the trees. Arya signaled for Sandor to move quietly. They crept closer, ears straining. They glimpsed torchlight flickering behind a rock outcrop. Carefully peering around the boulders, they saw a campsite. 5 men clustered around a small fire. 2 wore partial armor, another had a crossbow leaning against a log. The conversation was heated. "Can't go back south," one man muttered. "The Targaryens are rooting out the last of the Lannister loyalists." Another spat. "Let them root. We'll carve our own luck here in the Riverlands. Word is some Tully lords might pay well to drive out bandits." A third man, taller with a ragged beard, barked a laugh. "Ha! We're the bandits, you fool. But we can play both sides if we're clever. Raid some villages, blame it on others, then collect a reward to protect them." Arya's stomach churned. Typical Sellsword scum, eager to exploit chaos. She glanced at Sandor. He made a face as if this was precisely the sort of trouble he'd expected. With 5 men, a direct confrontation would be riskier. The crossbow alone was a concern. Yet letting them roam freely to harm the local small folk did not sit well with Arya. Before they could decide, one of the men rose to relieve himself, stepping away from the fire. He came around the rock outcrop, fiddling with his belt. He froze the instant he saw Arya's face peering from behind a boulder. She reacted instinctively, lunging forward to clamp a hand over his mouth. He was larger, but she had surprise. They toppled to the ground, grappling. He managed a muffled shout before the Hound rushed in, delivering a heavy blow to the back of his skull with the pommel of his sword. The man's eyes rolled back, and he went limp. Shouts erupted from the camp. Arya scrambled to her feet, heart pounding. Sandor yanked her aside as a crossbow bolt whistled past, embedding in the rock with a dull thunk. "Gods damn it," Sandor growled. "So much for a stealthy approach." The Sellswords advanced, 2 with swords, 1 with a spear, 1 reloading the crossbow. Arya and Sandor ducked behind the boulders. Another bolt clattered overhead. They needed to close the distance before the crossbowman could pick them off. Sandor bared his teeth, glancing at Arya. "Flank left. I'll go right." She nodded, adrenaline flooding her limbs. This was not a fight they'd sought, but they were in it now. He charged around the boulder, drawing attention, sword raised high with a roar. The crossbowman hastily fired a shot that went wide. Arya darted the other way, swiftly circling behind the swordsman. They were so focused on the towering Hound that they barely saw her until she was upon them. She aimed a rust at the one in partial armor, but he twisted aside, cursing. His companion swung wildly, forcing Arya to dance back. She recalled her water dancing lessons, the fluid footwork Farrell had taught her. She ducked low, slashing upward in a lightning strike at the man's knee. He stumbled with a cry. Sandor's blade crashed against another spear, snapping the wooden shaft. The Sellsword staggered, backpedaling. The crossbowman frantically tried to reload, but the Hound kicked a smoldering log from the campfire at him, sending sparks flying. The crossbowman yelped, dropping the bolt. Sandor lunged, delivering a punishing backhand that sent him sprawling into the mud. One swordsman, the one with partial armor, tried to slash at Arya's exposed flank. She barely twisted aside, feeling the blade graze her leather jerkin. She hissed in pain, but her adrenaline surged. She pivoted, hooking his wrist with needle's guard and ramming her pommel into his jaw. He staggered, spitting blood. She seized the opening, driving needle into his abdomen. With a ragged groan, he collapsed. The other swordsman that Arya had wounded earlier was crawling away, clutching his bleeding knee. She turned to see the Hound brutally headbutt the spear wielder, dropping him like a sack of turnips. The crossbowman lay unconscious, if not worse. In mere moments, for were down or wounded. The man whose skull Sandor had struck first was still out cold by the boulders. The entire ambush had ended as quickly as it began. Arya breathed hard, scanning for any other threats. No one was left standing. The campsite's fire crackled, the scent of singed pine filling the air. One Sellsword groaned, trying to rise but failing. Sandor glowered, sword raised, but did not deliver the killing blow. "This is messy," he muttered. "We can't just leave them alive to prey on others." But I'm not sure I want to be their headsman either. Arya swallowed, looking at the men. They would have gladly killed them for coin. She stepped over to the man with the crossbow, found him breathing shallowly. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead. She glanced at the Hound. Tie them up, or finish them? He gave a resigned shrug. Tie them up if you like, but they'll free themselves eventually, or starve if no one finds them. That's a slow death. Arya exhaled, a deep weariness settling in. Is there a village nearby? Maybe we can turn them over to some local authority? Sandor snorted. Local authority might be a ragged old man with a pitchfork. Hardly a match for 5 Sellswords. They'll just escape. This is the hell of it, girl. The realm's too broken for neat justice. She set her jaw, fighting the old instincts that told her to take vengeance without hesitation. But these men were criminals, not her personal enemies. She refused to become an executioner for every bandit in Westeros. We'll strip their weapons, take their coin if they have any ill-gotten gold. Then we leave them to their fate. The Hound raised an eyebrow. Leaving them alive? That's twice you've spared scum in as many weeks. It's not for them, she said quietly. It's for me. She crouched, collecting the crossbow, the swords, the spear's remnants. The men moaned, a few cursing. Sandor found a small chest near the fire containing silver stags and some copper. He shrugged and pocketed the silver. Better use it to buy food for ourselves than let them finance another robbery. Once they had all the weapons, they melted away into the forest, ignoring the wounded Sellsword's shouts of anger and pleas for mercy. Arya's heart pounded with the grim sense of a world in chaos. She was no saint, and the men's fates might be terrible. But at least she hadn't sunk another blade into a helpless body. They set camp a half-mile upstream, out of earshot. The day had left Arya exhausted, physically and emotionally. She leaned back against a fallen log, staring at the crossbow they'd confiscated. We keep stumbling into these run-ins, she remarked bitterly. Is this how the realm is now? Everyone is either a Sellsword or a victim. Sandor tossed a stick onto their fire. It's always been this way. Just used to be the Sellswords wore a noble sigil. She let out a mirthless laugh. True enough. Night fell, blanketing the sky in thick clouds. They slept in shifts warier than before. By morning, there was no sign of the Sellswords. Either they had crawled off or succumbed. Arya tried not to dwell on it. They resumed their northward march, forging ahead with an urgency that suggested both a desire to put distance between themselves and the events behind them. Days bled into a week. The land flattened, the vegetation thickening near wide rivers. Arya recognized the topography of the riverlands. Memories prickled. Her time at Harrenhal as a cupbearer, the horrors inflicted by Gregor Clegane's men. She glanced at Sandor, Gregor's brother, and recalled how that monstrous man had overshadowed the Hound's life too. The shared pain formed a silent, unspoken link. One late afternoon, they came upon the ruins of a holdfast that had been burned down during the war. Charred beams jutted from collapsed walls. Weeds sprouted amid the blackened rubble. A single battered tower stood, listing precariously. They paused, considering it for shelter, but the remains were too unstable. Instead, they pressed on. The road grew muddy from recent rains. They encountered a handful of refugees trudging south, half-starved, their eyes filled with desperation. None recognized Arya or the Hound, or if they did, they kept silent. Finally, near dusk on the 11th day since they left King's Landing, they spotted a thin plume of smoke in the distance. Investigating, they found a small hamlet nestled by a bend in a river, with half a dozen huts and a modest inn. A rickety wooden bridge spanned the water. The place looked quiet, though the presence of farmland suggested they might find proper food. Arya's stomach rumbled at the thought. They approached warily, not wanting to startle anyone. A pair of peasants, father and son by the look of them, stood outside one of the huts, patching a thatched roof. The father eyed Sandor's scars with unease. "You come in peace?" he called, voice trembling. Sandor withheld a curse. Arya stepped forward, raising an open palm. "We mean no harm. We're travelers looking for food and lodging." The man exchanged a glance with his son, then nodded. "The inn might have a room, though it's small. Don't cause trouble.